This story begins at the funeral of the Chan in Havan, where many people gathered. His death was tragic because he died too early. The guy was sitting near the wall and wept bitterly because of this tragedy. Two guys noticed that he still remains in the same place. The guys wanted to find out if he was a night's sleep, as they needed a minute of his attention. They were also investigating the death of CNN in Havan. They wanted to find out if the man could tell the guy before his death. The guy was quietly saying that he would be glad if John and Hungen, though, he told him something, because then it would not happen. Men who stood nearby did not understand his words. Chan sleep in a great aware that Hano Honey was in fact a lot of experiences. 12 years ago, when the boy was only 5, he survived the tragedy. His mother died tragically. The cause of his mother's death remained a mystery, and his father did not want to share the details. Since then, Chan and Han began to behave quite strange. If the man knew what it would end, he would not dare to. The following days, the man decided to take a small sleep in kindergarten on his own. Only the boys left the apartment. John and Han suddenly stopped, grabbed the small, and remembered whether he turned off the gas. And for the next moment, John and Han asked to sleep in a place while he quickly matched to check if he really turned off the gas. The man grabbed the lattice on the wall to stop near the kitchen and check the gas valve faster. It turned out that Chong and Han was in vain excited and nervous because gas was still turned off. It took the guys at least an hour to finally get the street. People said that In the Hole has an obsessive-compulsive disorder, a mental illness, in which a person suffers from obsessive thoughts that cause fear. Constantly watching the behavior of his father, Chan Sleep grew up with the same coward. When they laughing at him, he could not do anything. He constantly tried to protect himself with his hands so that the parks would not leave bruises. And they laughed even more, because they did not even beat him. And he already began to fear. The bad guys began to discuss how the dream is frightened, even when one of them just pretends to hit him. Suddenly, one of them was curious whether he was a psychopathic son, because his father was quite famous in our area. On the eve of the clashes, the boys discussed that gas pipes were leaking. Because of this, they came home to Chan and Han. Subsequently, it became known that Father John dreamed for a long time, and no one has yet offered him work in his company. The boys began to blame him, pointing that all neighbors hated them and everyone wants them to leave. Suddenly, one guy began to approach him, and he hid his hands again, trying to defend himself. This caused even more ridicule of others, because he could not even try to answer with a blow. After these words, the guy plunged into reflections. He froze in place, not paying attention to everything that happened around. He was believed that in the future he would not be able to protect himself. It was quite hot on the street, but on the horizon shone a beautiful sunset. Thanks to the bright light, the colors of the house in which the guy lived looked even more saturated. At this point, Chong sat in the hole in front of the computer, taking care of something. He thought feverishly how strongly the actions fell, and if he was invested in them, it would be ended in a disaster. The man remembered that his bank account was then 400,000 won. The young man had time to return home while his father was sitting in front of the computer. Sleep-In began to take the outerwear gradually and move on to the apartment. The father asked his son with anxious whether he took an umbrella. However, the son calmly assured his father that there was no rain on the street. The man began to reproach his son hotly, which you always need to take an umbrella, because the weather forecast was mentioned by the likelihood of rain in 40%. But the guy did not have the strength to listen to this further. The man still tried to explain to the guy that he could help him gather in the morning, but in response, he just started shouting at his father and tried to finish this conversation faster. The guy, shouting at his father, explained that the housewife asked them to leave because she could not tolerate such as they. The man only muttered that he knew because last night he dreamed of a terrible dream. However, the guy was too angry to talk to someone. The guy did not keep fierce and began to resent the fact that his father was constantly repeating, as if he knew everything in advance. The next moment, the guy with a fury reminded his father that he was his birthday, and he did not even congratulate his son. In the end, the guy asked his father not to worry about him, but to think about himself. However, the Hole was only able to utter his name before the son left the room. Chan sleep and loudly announced the entire apartment as he was ashamed of his father. The shame was so burning that he could no longer stand. It seemed as if he had never seen his face in the mirror. After some time, the man returned to look in the mirror. He was very unfortunate because of the young man's words. Hearing these words, the man froze and could not move. In his head echoed words spoken by his son, a tear that slowly drained from his cheek. Outside, it became cool and cooler, but the sunset remained impressively beautiful. At this time, a meeting was appointed because the guy found a suicide note of Mr. Chong in Havana, but the man could not believe it. The man left only a small sheet with an indiscriminate recording before his death. But then he thought only that if he knew what would happen, that would not happen. The father had the last gift for his son for his birthday, and he hoped that this gift would really be liked. Chan and Han apologized to Chan Sleep for that he could not protect him to the end. The guy was extremely upset because he realized that his father and his mother were now and he remained lonely. John and Han hoped that his son's life would be covered with flowers and flooded with sunlight. The darkness was already prevailing when the guy climbed home. Suddenly, he was detained by a woman who warned that if he did not pay the lease in the near future, he would have to release the room. In the next moment, the woman wondered, if people find out that in that room a person has died, no one wants to rent it. The guy could not say anything to the woman, only silently began to climb the room with a gloomy expression. Chan Sleep always thought why it was so difficult for his father to just ask how he was doing. The next moment, the guy muttered quietly that if something happens to him, it will no longer be important to anyone. The guy noticed a box lying on the floor right at the legs of Yu. At the same time, in his thoughts, a Chan died into Han, the only person who really took care of him. It was the last birthday gift from a father who could not forget about this day. The young man quietly muttered his father, hoping that he could hear her. The next moment, he began to unpack the gift lying on the floor. Chan Sleep-in thought that if his father made this gift, he could at least once see how his son used him. The young man could not imagine that his father could so ruthlessly leave him alone in a difficult moment of life. Sitting near the suitcase that had a gift of the young man, the guy stayed in the same place. Before the eyes of the young man, the image of his father, who was very similar to him, popped up. For a while, the image became clearer, and the young man realized that he was really his father. The young man immediately opened his eyes from an unexpected fright due to such developments. The next moment, the guy instantly removed the mask from a strong shock from what he saw, and his face at that moment was very faded. The guy could not understand what happened at that moment, but the system began to explain to him that he had to put on the device again. Chan Sleep in shock. His eyes were filled with fear when he considered the device, trying to understand that it could be. He immediately attached the device to the face again, unable to believe in the guess that came up in his thoughts. The guy couldn't believe that he sees his father again. However, he only talked about his level and skills that he could use. Among them was a preliminary review of the events the next day, which lasted only 1 minute. The young man did not understand what a preview was, but the device explained to him that only one skill was available automatically. Suddenly, the whole system seemed to be switched off by itself, and the guy was not particularly satisfied with this development. The program seemed to break from the information overload, and the guy began to burst in front of his eyes. In the next moment, the guy saw a girl sitting opposite and looked straight into his eyes. The guy didn't understand who she was and where he was, but the girl explained that the last time they met when he was still very young, so he could not remember her. But in any case, the father asked her to pass the money to the boy, which he could consider. It should use this money to cover living expenses and other important aspects of your life. The girl turned out to be very persistent that the boy was scared, and he asked her to wait a little. The envelope lay a large stack of 50,000th notes that looked a little from it. The guy immediately changed the facial expression as soon as he saw the bills in the envelope. He saw a girl who reminded him of a very important and roadman on the bills. He immediately removed his hands from the envelope and all the money fell on the ground. It was still unclear what happened and who was depicted on those bills. The guy is shocked and stressed, suddenly woke up when he suddenly saw his father in front of him. The morning has already come, and the sun's rays have fallen into the room of the Chong Dream Yu. The young man thought about what he saw and came to the conclusion that it was only a dream. He was convinced that he saw his father. Reflecting on it, the guy looked at the gift he left before his death. The guy was surprised when he took a gift from his father, and he suddenly turned off directly in his hands. Chan Sleep-yu was amazed at what happened. He could not believe that he saw the late father because it seemed impossible. The guy thought that he may have been a debt, but his father had no such money to leave him so much money. Suddenly, the guy escaped when he heard someone knocking on the door. The guy was surprised to open the door because there was a girl who was genuinely glad to see him already. The girl sought to enter the room to discuss everything in detail. The guy kindly poured the girl a glass of water and carefully put her on the table. The girl explained to the boy that she learned about the event too late, so she did not have time to the funeral. She sincerely wanted him to forgive her. She could not imagine how hard it was to cope with everything alone. She also talked about her uncle, who was not one of those who could just leave him. But the guy at that moment was only about how much she looked like a girl from Sleep. The guy was curious to know who she was and where she knew about his father's death. She just told him that they were last seen when he was still very young, so he couldn't remember it. In any case, his father asked her to pass the money that could be considered as a heritage. The girl stretched the boy with the money he could use to pay for his residence. The guy was stunned that her words coincided with his dream, and the girl pushed him to take the money faster. She also invested her business card so that in the event of any problems, he could contact her. The guy felt a shock when he saw the bills inside the envelope. Unfortunately, the girl was busy with important things, so she had to go. The guy did not know how he could accept this money because he first saw this girl. He could not take such a large amount, but the girl was persistent and explained that she simply gave his parents debt. There was still an envelope with a stack of notes of 5,000 on the table. The guy could not understand what was happening at that moment, and whether it had some logical meaning. In the next moment, a loud female cry was heard from the door, demanding that the guy open them. At first, the guy did not understand what the woman wanted from him, but in a moment she explained that she planned to put the house for sale that day. The woman felt the unpleasant smell of the boys' room and decided that they had not been cleaned there for a long time. In a moment, she told him that after he leaves, she had to carefully remove it in the room. The guy instantly lifted her to her face a thick pack of notes. Money for overdue rent and pledge for the room. The woman was surprised when the guy reached her money, and he immediately thought that this amount was insufficient for her. The next moment, the guy was angry with the woman that if he moved, then only at his own request. He added that he had immersed himself in his reflections and therefore asked not to bother him. After the woman left, he began to distribute money. After all, he had to save money to be able to live for several months. In addition, the young man noticed a business card of a girl who was an investigator of the Seoul City Police Department. Her name was Johnny's Tires. Dream Yu could not understand what this girl was attributed to his father. She disappeared so quickly that he did not have time to ask her some important questions. In the next moment, the young man remembered a gift from his father, who was left out of business. A little later, the young man began to consider the box that had a gift. There, he found a charger that could charge this amazing device. The guy immediately realized that it is worth trying to put the device on charging. Maybe then he will work. It was gradually squeezed on the street, but the guy's room was still illuminated. It was late evening, about 11 o'clock, but there was still light in the room. The guy waited for the device to be charged. He expected full charging for about 10 hours, but it seemed strange because the device was still not working. Chan dreamed in thinking that he had to renovate the device because the next day he had to go to school. As the guy began to look at the device, he suddenly turned on. This sudden change scared him. When the guy finally came to his senses, the device asked if he wanted to try it. Chan Sleep-In decided to obey the strange call of the device and immediately tried it. But at the same time, the guy noticed his father, who started some preliminary preparations. The guy wanted to talk to his father, but he answered like a robot. The next moment, the father greeted the guy on the level. The skills he could use then, in the next moment, his father began to anticipate an unpleasant event for tomorrow. The guy decided to ask a few more questions to his father, but he only answered, "This team is unknown." The father explained to his son that only one skill is now available to him, which is automatically activated. And in the next moment, the guy began to spin in front of his eyes, and around him the whole world circled. The next day, the street was illuminated by the bright sun, and its rays made their way through the window frames. The guy was incredibly surprised, suddenly seeing his school as if in a moment. Meanwhile, two guys argued on the field. The reason was the dissatisfaction of one of them because the comrade did not give the ball. As a result, the conflict grew into mutual images. The dispute between the two boys quickly grew into a small school fight. The guy was amazed, watching what happened on the field at that moment. Suddenly, Chan Sleep-In alert, feeling that some evil hangs in the air. In the next moment, the guy realized that something was wrong, and suddenly felt an unknown force on him at a frantic speed. From such a blow, the guy lost consciousness and lay without signs of life. Three guys who were constantly mocking him decided to throw away the brick to scare the guy. But the result was not at all as they expected. The guy was barely able to open his eyes, hoping that it would give him at least some chance to survive. However, John Sleep could not keep his eyes open for a long time and closed them. Suddenly, the guy comes out of viewing the anticipation of the unpleasant event, feeling that all this really happened. The guy still could not understand what the device was and how the deceased father of the young man could communicate with him. The next day, on that sunny day, the young man still went to school. And immediately, he went to the teacher, because he was not at school for a long time because of his father's death. The guy talked to an older man who did not know how to answer a young man. The man told the boy that it was time for lunch and wished him to eat and gain strength before class. The guy passed by a sports field where a group of boys discussed the game strategies. But soon a dispute arose between the boys, as a result of which they began to call each other. The guy immediately realized what the same thing happened when he wore the device. Everything was exactly the same as there. The young man was amazed at how it could be. A moment later, the young man began to remember what would happen next. He remembered in a timely manner that the brick should fall from above, that the boys were thrown from the roof. Subsequently, they began to laugh at him because he again frightened, as in all the previous times. The guy could not believe that he managed to evade a falling brick. Subsequently, the guy began to reflect on all these situations even more carefully. The next day, the guy tried to turn on the device again, but he did not respond. Later, dream in mentioning time, because he remembered that the device worked only about 11 evening. The darkness has already thickened on the street and the fog rose, but the guy's room was still burning brightly. In the next moment, his father warned his son that the preliminary review was already beginning, but the guy did not show much delight. Due to the fact that the guy voiced words that his father did not understand, he confessed that this team was unknown to him. The next moment, the father greeted the boy on the third level. The guy thought, if his level continues to grow, he would be able to acquire new, better skills than those that he had. And it is possible even without attempting to guess the lottery numbers. But later, the guy realized that he was able to predict prices for promotions and cryptocurrencies. The guy decided to find out his father about the third level skills. The father politely explained that he is not only able to use this skill at some point, but also to preview the unpleasant events that will occur in the next 5 minutes. Chan's sleep was shocked when he learned that, along with increasing levels, he increased in the time to predict unpleasant events. The preview of the events of the next day soon began. At that moment, 3 guys with mocking smiles came to him, asking what he did, and at the same time calling him. He calmly replied that he knew what would happen. Later, one of the boys began to make fun of him because no one could predict what would happen to him in the future. Suddenly, the guy struck a dream in his fist in his chest, from which blood flowed from his mouth. The boys began to realize that probably the guy stopped breathing, and now they were afraid of fear of what was next. And John Sleepin lay on the floor with wide open, dead eyes, without any signs of life. The young man began to realize that the next day he could get a blow to a chest that could become deadly. However, the next moment, the father explained that he had 5 more skills to work out. Initially, the Dream of You did not understand what workout it was. It turned out that he could repeat the snippet viewing 5 times. Later, his father asked the boy to take the controller with both hands. The guy looked into the box from the device immediately and found something like a controller. The father immediately told his son that his first workout would begin in a few minutes. 3 guys were approached by Khan, and they were rudely asked what he was doing now. He only replied that he knew that it would happen. The boys were not too delighted with the news, and the dream and the nervous tension had a very frightened appearance. The next moment, one of the boys instantly swung his fist, aiming just in the chest of another. But the young man still managed to cure in such a way that the enemy's fist did not hit him. 2 guys standing nearby and watching the fight immediately began to laugh at a friend. None of them even suspected that Chan Sleep would be able to evade a blow. That guy was immediately angry because the dream of disgraced him in the eyes of friends. He was ready to kill him, but just got angry and ordered the guy to hit him. The next moment, the young man hit the Quona's Sleep in the cheek. The young man began to angry at him because the Quona sleep in the wrong order and could not hit him. Meanwhile, the Dream of Pain fell to his knees, pressing his arms to the head. After a while, the guy decided not to lose the moment and get the enemy, hitting his feet. After a few minutes of blows, the guy began to close his eyes a little. The preview time was over, and the guy lay in his room on the floor, holding his body firmly. He was painful. He could not understand why he was so painful from a simple workout where there was no real pain. Subsequently, the guy began to think, if there is no pain, then the strength would not appear. And therefore, these workouts lose meaning. Chan slept at training so carefully that he did not even notice how completely the day was hidden. The next day, there was a wonderful weather on the street, and the bright sun shone everything around. The whole class was saturated with students who did their own business, and the guy only sat and waited for the appearance of the same trinity. The guy was quietly waiting for their appearance because thanks to night training, he was completely ready. And in the next moment, the class included 3 bored guys. One of them suggested getting rid of boredom, having released the Dream of You. One of them raised his hands immediately and explained to the other that nothing easier to look. Chan Sleep-In remained calm and confident. In his eyes, there was no hint of fear or anxiety. When the guy leaned a little to the side of the dream, He hoped to see the fear, but the dream in only calmly looked him straight into his eyes. He decided that the dream did not notice his first attempt to strike and decided to try again. The young man, just thinking for a moment, smiled in response. Chan Sleep, in no more afraid, and calmly accepted what happened. The guy did not understand what the dream was talking about, but he quickly explained that he predicted it, and there was no point in being afraid. The guy who watched the situation with his friend did not understand what the dream was saying. The guy who stood next to the dream did not believe him and believed that he was saying nonsense. After a while, the guy began to question whether he knew the one that his fist was about to hit the dream in his chest. However, a dream had instantly and bravely stopped the opponent. All the audience was amazed because this guy could be expected, but not exactly that he would be able to evade a blow. However, the rival, angry with the guy, ordered him to try to hit him again. The young man knew in advance which fist of the opponent would try to hit his next moment, and immediately he managed to dodge the impact that the opponent tried to strike. The guy tried to determine the exact moment of the opponent's attack, which caused him a slight excitement. Chan Sleep at the same moment managed to evade the impact of the opponent because he calculated every movement in advance. The enemy's friends were curious about why he repeating the same actions and mocking him. Chui's son Don was convinced that the guy was catching from him, and it caused him a great desire to study him for unceremonious kids. However, at that moment, the guy only counts the seconds to the approach of Don's son. Full of the desire for revenge, he quickly approached the guy to start a fight. But the guy was just standing in place, patiently waiting for the right moment to achieve a great result. He only remained for the right time. And when the moment came, the guy cleverly and instantly attacked the opponent, so that he would not have time to harm him. And at the same time, Chang Sleep in the opponent of the footsteps to finally complete the case. Through the footsteps, Don's son, Don spilled over in the air and lit up several desks. The young man was amazed at himself because for the first time he did something similar. The guy was delighted with the fact that his strategy had succeeded in glory. Chui's son Don was dissatisfied with his strategy and very angry because of this, his comrades mocked him. But the guy did not know how to act at that moment because he could not predict what would happen next. But for the next moment, a call for a lesson was perfect to stop the fight. Two guys began to reassure their friend because at any moment their teacher had to enter the class. However, the son of Don could never calm down because he was still annoyed by John's dream of you. But suddenly, the next moment, the dream of Don asked if he would like to talk to him. Later, the guy approached the dream to discuss what eyesight people who usually get from him for nuts and whether they really have good eyesight. If the guy decided that he saw at that moment, he would have suggested to try. Later, the guy suggested that Chan sleep in meeting the son of Don, one after lessons to find out the relationship. But the guy calmly explained that he does not deny if the meeting will take place the next day. But one of the Trinity did not hear his answer and dared to ask. In the next moment, John Dream and Almost did not exclaim to the whole class that they would fight the next day. The guy just laughed at his answer and explained the dream in that if that day did not work, then the fight would take place next. At this point, the teacher came to the class and informed the students that the bell had already been heard. Chue San-dan was completely prepared for the next day and, annoyed, with force pushed the guy with his shoulder. He prepared so carefully for the next day that he barely held back the desire to hurt the guy. After all, they laughed not at the dream, but above him. The guy responded calmly to the event in the classroom and with a light heart waited the next day. The boy's father immediately began to flip through, greeting his son with an increase in level. The guy was interested in why his level grew so quickly. He thought it was possible only at the beginning. He was also very interested in the fourth level skills. The father told the guy that after a while there would be a preview of the negative event the next day, which would last 5 minutes. It was also an opportunity to conduct 5 workouts. He also had the opportunity to review the record of the previous day, the duration of which was 10 minutes and made 5 repeated attempts. The events of that day allowed you to choose a specific entry which guy wanted to view. The guy was shocked, learning about the additional recording function, but he already knew everything that happened that day. Subsequently, the guy plunged into thinking about it and even began to make some assumptions. The guy seriously wondered what he would happen if he again watched a fight with Chue's son Don. Most likely, the guy will be able to find the weaknesses of Don's son and defeat him in a fight. The next moment, the guy ordered the device to reproduce a fight from Chue's son Don, losing him 5 times for 10 minutes. He watched the fight from another perspective as if he became the viewer of this scene. In the son of Don, the lower part of the body was much weaker, which was why it was difficult for him to keep his balance. It turned out that if the guy clenched his fist, he would be able to throw him to the ground in that situation. After a while, the guy finished using the writing skill that he clearly liked. The last thing the boy had to view is a preview of the event the next day, which promised to be unpleasant and will last 5 minutes. Before him was the leader of the three, who mocked him and without taking his gaze looked at the boy. The guy did not quite understand what was happening, but the attacker obviously intended to move to sleep with bad intentions. His fist was rapidly approaching, and a few more seconds, he would have hit the face of a dream in the face of a dream. The young man burned anger to sleep because he dared to hit him. Chan Sleep-in lay on the floor, feeling unbearable pain in the face. His device flew to the side. The guy could not understand how it happened that his father broke from his face and fell a few meters away from him. He was thinking about this unpleasant event because he did not believe that he could hit Pak Chan-juice. He is not sure about the son of Don, but Pak Chan-jok is undoubtedly the strongest among freshmen in high school when it comes to fights. The guy was aware that only the crazy would dare to attack the junction. Chan slept at a very worried day before the next day. He wanted to carefully consider his following actions. The young man remained 5 more workouts, which needed to take the controller with both hands. Sleep in even joyfully perceived additional workouts, because he did not want to disgrace the next day during the duel. Outside, it was already darkened, and the guy was still sitting in the light on. At the end of the preview, the guy finally was able to rest and prepare for the next day. Unfortunately, the device that his father gave before death could no longer be used. The guy was aware that if he had to fight with the juice the next day, he would last no more than 2 minutes. The next day, the guy called the school to inform that he would not be there today. Chan Sleep-in decided that if he did not go to school, there would be no reason to start a fight that day. The guy did not sleep all night taking care of this clash, and because of that, he still wanted to fall into sleep. Chan Sleep in the end decided to relax. When he went to bed, the clock showed 9:30 in the morning. It got darker on the street, but the guy still didn't woke up, although it was 5 o'clock in the evening. However, in the next moment, the guy woke up from the loud noise that heard from the corridor. At the door, the same Trinity, with whom that day, a clash had to happen that day. The guy had already thought that, having missed the class, he would avoid punishment. But they, in some way, learned where he lives. They explained to him that he himself told them that he deliberately suffered a fight the next day, because he may be scared. The guy didn't know what to do and first wanted to call the police. But the phone discharged timely, and because of this, the call of the police was canceled. The guy had to look for another opportunity to contact. The guy feverishly searched the room in search of a charger, but could not find it. This Trinity began to threaten that if it is not at home, they will break the door and take everything inside. The guy just looked sadly at the device that was on charging. He quickly realized that this would not be possible. He will have to go out and fight them, as he previously spoke. The next moment, the guy left the room, and one of the guys began to make fun of him, they say. He finally dared to leave his hiding place and stop hiding from reality. The guy immediately offered to go out and move to where the boys planned to fight. Don's son looked at the guy with pleasure because he already knew where they would be able to make a fight unnoticed. It was a building that seemed neglected, but at that moment there was already a clash between the boys. And the dream of the company, which belonged to their company, had already caused sympathy for the Don son. He sought to dream of a dream that he had tried to touch him at all. The young man quietly ordered him to silence and start attacking. The son of Don Don became angry with the words of the young man, and without holding back his anger, rushed at him with his fist. He was unusual when someone pointed to him how to act. His legs were moving so slowly that it was easier for the boy to hit Don's son. The next moment, the guy struck the Don's son with his fist on his neck. He was not delighted with what was happening because for the first time he was won in the fight by some inexperienced guy. The boys watched the situation with interest. They were disappointed by the son's son of Don, but pleasantly surprised by the agility of Chong Sleep-yu. The dream was pleased that he was not lazy to see how they fought at the time, and even watched this scene several times. During the fight, the guy often mentioned what he saw in preliminary views of negative events. The guy often mentioned how many times he looked at the scene of the fight that day. And he carefully prepared for this fight, because of which he did not sleep all night, but only memorized everything. It seemed strange to the boys that the son of Don was constantly receiving from sleep, but another young man who also watched the fight did not agree with him. If he looked more closely, he would see that the ability to attack and defend himself in Chue's son Don is completely imperfect. However, they could not understand how the boy managed to win the son of Don. When the guy fell, it seemed that it was the end of the fight, because the opponent was injured. But the young man could not quench his rage and sought to fully decay and revenge the son of the Dawn. At the same moment, the leader of the Trinity approached him and informed that he had won the fight. The young man explained that they would not bother him anymore. Pak Chan-jok decided that the young man did not understand him. Even if he really was able to fight, it was worth showing it from the beginning. They were wondering why Chan's sleep-in earlier only tolerated indifference, not corresponded to the abusers. Subsequently, they began to remember his father, telling how bad he was. The boy did not like it, and he just wanted to get home as soon as possible. But the boys continued to insult his father, calling him a crazy maniac. If it were not true, he could deny. Then why was his father still beat him? The main one from the Trinity learned that the guy witnessed the death of his father. The guy felt as if he deliberately spread his painful memories, or that he was unlikely. He was just interested in how it was to witness such a picture. The young man was very angry when his father started talking badly, and because of this, he pounced on the fat. His eyes glowed at the same time rage and fatigue. Chui's son Don was stunned when he saw Chong sleep in could so powerfully hit Pak Chan Juice himself. Chan-jok was stunned by what had happened because for the first time, someone dared to hit him. In the next moment, the guy was very angry in a dream in, and with an expression of dissatisfaction on his face, headed for him. The guy was aware that the worst thing that happened that day was how he hit Pak Chan Juice right in his face. Chan Sleep was already ready for the fact that he would be fully beaten, but tried to comfort himself with the idea that he had to happen to avoid. A beautiful orange sunset gradually unfolded on the street, but at this moment, a dream was rapidly racing for Chan-jok, trying to catch it as soon as possible. He tried in every possible way to catch and offend the guy while they ran. At that moment, the guy was clearly aware that he would not be able to escape, because after a clash with Chui's son Don, he had no strength. Chan Sleep was confused, not knowing how to avoid that guy. Moreover, he did not know what to do next. But suddenly, the next moment, the guy rushes directly under the wheels of a car, which was driving a few meters away. The guy was so stunned by what happened that he did not pay attention to where he was running. The car was only miraculously able to stop near him, and the young man simply fell on the asphalt. The driver immediately ran out of the car and began to quit the young man while he suddenly rushed on the road. The guy quietly pleaded with the man for help, but he could not understand what had happened. Mr. Chan-jok became angry with him and again began to consider him a coward. The guy returned home on a fairly dark lane, where the lanterns barely illuminated the way. He was extremely glad that he was able to escape from the junction, but at the same time worried that he was waiting for him the next day. The guy was convinced that Pak Chan's sock would surely kill him after he had thrown sand directly into his eyes. He even reflected whether or not to declare him to the police. Chan Dream of the Woo was in great confusion, because if he decides to write a statement on that guy, then what could say? Except that that day he beat the son of Don's Chue, and later threw the sand in Pak Chan Juice. A little later, he wondered that they could wait for him near his home. Unfortunately, the young man was completely doomed because no one was able to help him. Suddenly, the young man began to remember what was so firmly in his memory. He pulled out a girl's business card named Tyra Johi, who worked in a police station. The girl asked the boy for a long time about the 3 young men who were bullied by him: Pak Chan Jana, Lee Don Jina, and Chan Son of Dawn. Tyra Johi was dealing with school violence, and without evidence, it was difficult. She turned to the relevant department, but they had to wait for the question to be considered. In addition, she asked to look after the boy's house so that others did not come close. The girl wanted to make sure that the guy had no other difficulties, but he only explained that the money she gave him had already been spent on renting his room. The young man became interesting that he united her with his father. The girl didn't even know where to start. When she studied in high school, she lived next to them. It was then that she met his mother, because she also worked in the police. The guy could not believe the girl's words because they seemed to him a lie. He decided to clarify the girl again all that she told him. When the guy was still small, his mother died, and every time he asked about her, his father was very angry. The girl was extremely sorry for Chan Sleep In, and she listened carefully to his words. Once upon a time, his family supported the girl because at that moment they were neighbors. At the moment when there were 2 cans of sparkling water on their table, the girl was convinced that his mother became her rescuer. After all, the classmate tried to rape the girl that day, but his mother was stuck in time to save her. This inadequate violin also came from a wealthy family, as his parents worked in a well-known law firm. After all, he was justified. The girl was so angry that she thought of suicide, but she was rescued by his mother. And his father asked daily how she was. His father constantly reminded her to never give up, because she is a strong girl, and hope arises even when you continue to live on. After moving, their communication with his father almost stopped, and it seemed very strange to the girl because he was not the one who easily tears the relationship. After his mother's death, the guy noted that his father had significantly changed his attitude to him. The next moment, the girl put her hand on the guy's shoulder. The girl dreamed of becoming as cool police as a boy's mother, and so she decided to take care of him. The young man did not immediately understand what the girl was talking about. The girl warned the boy in advance so that he, even if it becomes difficult, did not give up and moved on. The guy even felt a little joy, realizing that from that day he had at least some support from another person. At that moment, the guy noted that he was already 11 o'clock in the afternoon. The guy was stunned by learning that his mother worked in the police. He could not understand why his father decided to hide this information from him. However, in any case, if the guy learned of it, holding the device that his father gave him before his death. In the next moment, he saw his father again, who started preview. The guy had the 4th level, exactly as he fought with a joke. This means that his skills remain the same as before. The father advised the boy how to increase his level, not to avoid fate, but to fight it to the last. The guy realized that if he had joined the juice that day, then his level and skills would have increased significantly. However, the dream and feared clashes with Pak-chan juice. He was 15 centimeters higher, and in addition, there was a significant difference in weight. The guy did not want to watch the record of that day, and also refused to start by watching the next unpleasant event. At first, the dream did not understand where he found himself, but in the next moment, he guessed that it was Elaine at school. At this point, a large amount of sand flew into the face of the guy. The guy was confused. At that moment, there was an unexpected case that deprived him of his vision. Suddenly, he heard someone's very familiar voice, who joyfully commented that he was also unpleasant because of this incident, because he was also almost blind. The guy gradually began to cry because of pain in his eyes. The guy could not understand why his eyes hurt and why it happened. From the very beginning, he saw nothing, but was convinced that he heard the voice of Pak Chan-sok. He understood that the next day, he was again waiting for a sandstorm. Chan Sleep-in decided to train again to keep all these tests accurately. The guy made every effort to withstand pain and ridicule that often poured 3 guys. Subsequently, the guy lost the feeling in his hands that could no longer move. Each time he stepped on the sand, the pain became more unbearable. At that moment, 2 boys grabbed his hands and Pak Chan-jok threw his sand into his face. And John Dreamin began to realize that he would have to put up with it. One of the guys even thought he was looking steeper than they thought before. Despite what happened near the abandoned building, the guy was still able to come to school. Chui's son Don was not happy that the guy still appeared at school after he made a jug with a vat. After that, full of anger, he hit the stone wall, releasing all his rage in this blow. The guy heard this sharp sound and was a little scared. After that, the guy immediately flew a handful of sand to get into his eyes exactly. Pak Chan-jok was waiting for the boy's actions to hurt you. Other boys immediately grabbed his hands to keep it harder. After all, because of him that day, almost did not blind Pak Chan-jok, a guy who always avenged for his bad attitude. Pak Chan-jok forced the boy to forcefully open his eyes to put the sand in them. He sincerely sought Chan Sleep to face his pain and humiliation. After all, it was sent to him, who hoped that he would finally be able to overcome his fear and oppose Pak Chan-soka. The guy with incredible force threw the sand clamped in his fist. Chan Sleep-in began to shout into a full voice, urging the boys to let him go, but they did not respond. After that, a handful of sand hit the face of the boy, and the one who stood behind the Chan Dream Bee was surprised at such a surprise. The guy himself was a little surprised that he felt less pain than watching bad events. Chan Sleep-in himself could not believe that in a few training he gained such an incredible strength. Chan Sleep-in thinking how he managed to become so strong so quickly. Pak Chan-jok was angry with the boys because they could not hold the young man properly. Recently, Chan Sleep is increasingly affected by Pak Chan juice. Then Pak Chan-jok struck the young man in his face. He very much wished the dream to surprise him even more. After all, how did he escape from the strong hands of the guy who kept him so as not to let him slip? And during each virtual training, he received a full load. Joan. The Dream of You was completely sure that he would not be able to hit himself anymore. The boys were amazed at the school lane. After all, the dream at last gained courage and struck Pak Chan juice. From a powerful blow, Pak Chan-jok closed his eyes and lowered his head to the floor. With hatred in the eyes of Pak Chan-jok turned to Sleep-in to find out if he finished. However, the guy sat on the floor at that moment without one slipper looking down. In the next moment, Pak Chan-jok, despite his hysterical laughter, realized that Chan Sleep hit him in his face. After that, he began to explain to the boy that he really wanted him to hit him, but the guy only sat on the floor. When Pak Chan-jok noticed that the guy did not answer, he began to swing on him. The next moment, the elderly man looked out of his balcony and warned them elsewhere. Otherwise, he would call the police. Friend Chanjus began to explain that if they continue, Chan's sleep, you could be seriously affected. They had to get rumored, as if a vat June had hit you. But even if this rumor spread, no one would believe in this fiction. The guy sat on the floor in a lane with his eyes closed without giving any signs of life. However, the next moment the guy still managed to open his eyes to check that those who were mocking him disappeared. He already started thinking about his death, but still a dream was able to survive. The darkness was already on the street, but in the room of the guy, as always at this time, light. In Hano's hospital, Sleep In reported that he had no serious injuries. However, he was aware that he was beaten well that day, and now the whole body is at pain. In the next moment, the device asked the guy to put it on. The guy looked at the device with tired and powerless eyes. He just couldn't. At that moment, the guy felt very bad, and that day he wanted to relax from everything. The device urgently demanded that the guy put it on that the young man was angry, and he stood up. He sought to relax, but still decided to put on the device, though he realized that it was impossible to train in this condition. But his father only congratulated him on the level of increasing, telling about new skills, predicting trouble the next day for 10 minutes, and the opportunity to complete 10 training. View the record of the day, the duration of which was an hour, with the opportunity to conduct 10 workouts. Pak Chan-jok asked the guy sharply why he was looking at him so carefully. After that, the guy rushed to run to the opposite direction. Chan Sleep, in a smiling manner, asked the students who were in the hallway to disperse so that he could run freely. Pak Chan Sok mockingly watched the guy who was racing after him because he had already tried to escape again. Unlike others, a dream was glad every time the guy ran after him. Chanjok was about to stop, but the stubborn pursuer did not stop it. The boys have already reached the 5th floor, but the doors on the roof were closed. Chanjok intriguedly wondered where his pursuer would now run. But for the next moment, John Sleep in a powerfully hit the guy with his foot in the face. Pak Chanjok barely resisted the handrail so that he would not fall. In the next moment, the guy became angry and a dream in and rapidly rushed to him on the stairs. He decided to try to hit the guy in his chest, but something restrained him. It turned out that the guy was ahead of Pak Chanjus, striking him with his leg. As a result, Pak Chan-jok did not stay and rolled down the stairs. The guy rolled down the stairs and rolled directly on a pile of various boxes. During training, Chan Sleep in found stairs. Only the roof remained because no one could appear on top. The guy was convinced that until Pak Chan-jok was below him, he would not be able to push the sleep. Chan dreamed in the thought that his legs are longer than the arms of the junction, so he only needed to maintain his position. He was fully convinced that this position brings him undeniable benefit. The boy's friends believed that the dream was too self-confident, and if he really sought fights, he would have descended for a long time. He did not understand what badly fight for his life. He explained to the boys that even while remaining in the same place, he would be able to overcome his opponent. Pak Chan-jok was stunned by the guy asking that he was bad in the fight for life. In the next moment, the guy immediately rushed to the other way. Pak Chan-jok rushed to the stick, lying nearby. The guy remembered how in the 7th training, Pak Chan-sok also used weapons. He approached the boy step by step, and he continued to stand still. Suddenly, the guy grabbed a stick held by the opponent in the next moment. Pak Chan-jok was surprised that the guy managed to grasp the stick, which he kept quite firmly. He was driving a dream from Chan because they could not believe that the dream could be overcome by Pak Chan-jus. The young man quickly remembered all the workouts and realized that if he releases, the opponent would lose his balance. After that, the guy struck Chang Juice so that he once again flew through the stairs. Chan diced back in different and placed buys that the guy did not stay on his feet. The guys who watched the events were a little stunned by what they saw. Chan sleep in a firmly grabbed guy so that he could not break free. However, at any moment, the opponent could strike him. The students of the school where the guy studied immediately came to the noise and were stunned by the fact that Chong Sleep In pushed the junction. The young man with a burning anger looked at the one who was constantly mocking him. Pak Chan-jok thought that the young man was going to hit him again. But in the next moment, the guy let him go and stood up, leaving the junction of the juice to sit on the floor. Unfortunately, in the next moment, the boy was waiting for problems, because during his last workout, he could not find a way to overcome Pak Chan-juka. His attacks became too weak, and besides, after a long fight, which was not over, he felt severe fatigue. If Chan-jok would judge the events that were happening at that moment, it seemed to him that that boy had some strategy. But at the same moment, the guy hit his fist in his nose. Chan Sleep In already lay on the floor from a strong blow, and his opponent thought that there were probably no strategies in sleep. He also wondered if he should stop. The guy quietly explained that he wanted to stop the fight, but Pak Chan-jok was just getting closer to him. The next moment, the guy rose, took the stick, which was nearby, and asked the junction of the junction how it could be used at that moment. Everyone watched the guy begin to wave more hard, and in the next moment, the guy breaks the window that was near him. Pak Chan-jok was amazed at the youth's recklessness. Everyone who just watched the events was stunned. Che's son Don believed that Chan Sleep-in probably went crazy because recently his behavior was quite strange. The guy was already standing in the window frame, hinting at the junction that he intended to kill him. He warned Pak Chan-juice, if he dares to get closer or touch it, he will jump out of the window and die. The guy believed that it was just a performance, but a dream at this moment thought if he would like him to die. The guy began to laugh at Chan-juice because it seemed to him that he was scared. Through the boy's hooks, Pak Chan-sok decided to help jump out of the window and began to approach him slowly. The guy barely touched the young man's foot, who at that moment stood on the window frame. Chan Sleep-in barely kept outside the window. The guy was shocked when I saw a dream you started falling out of the window. Pak Chan-jok was frightened by Chan Sleep-in and tried to grab him by his feet. The young man was very afraid that he would not be able to keep the dream of you. In the next moment, the guy appealed to his comrades to help pull it out. After that, they put him on the floor and began to boil because his behavior was crazy. Pak Chan-jok was thinking that the guy may wanted to make a killer from him because he asked what feelings he felt during his father's death. His feelings were like the one who survived himself at that moment, and he even thought about whether there was a feeling in the world worse than that. He always sought to follow him, but the courage for that was missing. Therefore, the guy asked Pak Chan-juice to do so because he also had that desire. He even confessed to him that he had an overwhelming desire to kill him. The guy approached the fat junction with glass in his hand, but Chan-jok did not want him to approach even closer. If Chan Sleep-in remained alive, then his death will be even more desirable. Squeezing a fragment of the glass in his hand, the guy swung and tried to hit him with a dice. But he managed to evade and instantly responded with a counterattack towards the dream of you. Chan-jok struck such a force that the dream of falling on the floor. However, even this did not stop him. He grabbed the debris again and reached for the junction again. Sleep noted that he could not overcome it with a simple blow, and stretching his hand to the junction, suggested using a wreck. Chan-jok only swayed, and in the next moment he rushed to flee, pushing everyone around. His friends immediately rushed after him, shouting to stop and wait for them. The dream at last took a breath and, leaning against the wall, said that today he was really ready for death. However, despite this, he survived again. The time has passed, and a company of 3 hooligans is located in a lane. One of the guys talked on the phone. When he finished the conversation and put the phone, he asked aloud what the problem with this John's dream W. Sun Don immediately asked if he told a dream about a fight. The guy replied that the dream did not tell anything, and instead invented that he broke the window due to the stress caused by his father's death and wounded his hand. The guy noted that the teacher was aware of the social authority of Dream-in and asked if it would not force him to close his eyes on this misconduct. The son of Dawn suggested that the dream could not say anything. He was afraid that they would take revenge on him. Finally, Von Jock intervened, noting, "Can a person be afraid of revenge if he was first attacked?" The son of Dawn suggested in this case to stop clinging to Sleep-in, but Chan-sok noted that the whole school saw their fight and leave it just so he is not going. Chan-jok was upset that he was beaten by a poor guy, and now he couldn't even go to school. Friends suggested catching and beating a Dream-in, but Chan-jok replied that there was no point in beating someone who was ready to die. Returning to his friends, Chan-jok smiled strangely and noted that it would be better to send a Dream in prison. Returning home, the Dream-in carefully tied the wounded hand and put on his glasses. He noted that, despite the terrible events experienced on this day, his level did not increase. Apparently, this was not enough. Sleep was already spending time to watch the record, but something with your hand still had to be done. However, soon the guy focused on finding out what would happen tomorrow. And he was stunned when he saw that he was waiting for the police. The next day at school, after lessons, the son of Dawn approached the Dream. He said he heard a dream in no one about a fight and added that he was grateful to him. It turned out that in the evening, the boys were going to the son of Dawn at home, and he invited a Dream to join them. Don's son reported that his parents would not be home today. They also wanted to ask Sleep for all previous misunderstandings. To the surprise Don's son, the Dream-in unexpectedly agreed and said he would come. That evening, the Dream came home to Don's son. He met him and led him to the living room where other guys gathered. They thanked the Dream for the fact that he came and said they ordered a pizza that had to arrive in half an hour. The dream at once asked if the vat really wanted to apologize because they had annoyed him before, and now they suddenly decided to change. Suddenly, the dream noticed the dream of Ken, who was sitting distance. However, Don's son immediately interrupted his thoughts, proposing to make peace and become good friends. So he invited a dream in his room to show a computer. As soon as the boys went, Chanjok turned to Ken's dream to the question of whether he understood everything he told him. Ken's dream only nodded timidly, and Chanjok added that if he does everything right, he would never touch him again. Meanwhile, the son of Dawn and Sleep in the Room were sitting in the room, and the son of Dawn was passionate about his computer. Suddenly, someone's screams came from the corridor. When the dream ran to the hall, he saw Ken's vat. Ken's dream spoke about his repentance, but Chanjok did not listen to him at all. Chanjok threatened to kill Ken's dream, falling asleep with images. The dream tried to rush to them, but two other guys were suddenly blocked by him. However, this was not stopped by Sun W. He struck both guys to free their way. Meanwhile, Chanjok managed to grab the scissors from the table, saying that Ken Mina will smile. Chanjok asked with an ironic smile why Ken's sleep was so serious. Already intended to use the scissors, he did not have time to fulfill his plan because the dream in his hands quickly pulled them out of his hands. Chanjok stood up and, turning to Sleep In, asked if he really wanted him to try to kill him again. With these words, the guy lifted his blouse and offered a dream to try to hit him. But suddenly, their distraction is a door call. Ken Ming quickly hurried to the door where the courier was already standing with a pizza. Seeing him, Ken Ming immediately began to ask for help. The waiter looked at the boy in surprise and asked what happened to him and what happened to his face. At this point, Ken Ming suddenly pointed his finger to Sleep, claiming that he had beat him. After a while, the whole company found itself in the police department. Chan, Jock, and Dream sitting in silence as two other guys were testified. They argued that they tried to stop Sleep In, and even suffered in this process, but it did not stop it. After listening to them, the police officer asked how it happened that three could not stop one, the appearance of a rather weak guy. On this, they immediately began to justify themselves, stating that he threatened them with scissors. Don's son reported that police could interview their classmates and mentioned that yesterday the dream was breaking the school window. The man was about to answer something, but suddenly he interrupted by Johnny, who suddenly broke into the department. Idzi introduced herself, clarifying that she had arrived from the investigative department of the Capitol Police Department. The man seems to know her, asking if he had talked to her on the phone before. The man noted that eyewitness testimony was true and wondered in Jedi whether it was difficult. He added that they now interrogate the witness of Ken Mina, and as soon as they understand it, the case will be transferred to the prosecutor's office. Sighing, the girl turned to Sleep In, asking if he really did it. To which he replied that the words of the accused are unlikely to be interested in, because only the victim knows the truth. Yeji asked what he was talking about, but the dream did not answer, contacting the juice of the juice instead. When he said, the dream suspiciously asked if he had not put it all to send a dream to the lattice. Last evening, the dream of learning that he was arrested by police and will accuse Ken Mina. That's all the dream you could find out during preview. The guy could not understand how it was possible because he did not have any reason to beat Ken Mina. The training would be in vain, and the only thing that could learn is to flee from the police department. But suddenly he was thought. To prove his innocence, there was a need for evidence. With this idea in his head, he thought about a possible plan of action. In response to the question, the dream of a vat was just asking why he was lying, and added that he was in prison. He wanted to add something else, but suddenly one of the police officers asked which of the boys was Pachan Juice. When Chanjok responded, the man began to talk about how no student should behave like a bully, but the second police officer interrupted him, asking if they finished the interrogation of the victim. Then the second man pulled a handle out of his pocket, noting that the victim had given him. Then he explained that it was not a pen, but a recorder, and it recorded everything that happened today with a dream of Ken Min. Then the man turned on the record and suggested listening to everything that was recorded. On the recording, he said that today he had to beat Ken Mina, and he in turn had to blame the dream of you. The record also heard Don Gin threatened Ken Minu. He said that he and his son Don planned to provide false testimony, and if Ken Ming, though he is told by someone, would not be congratulated. After that, Chan Jok stood sharply from his seat, saying that all this is not true, and they wanted to overcome it. The police officer reassured him, asked if they were familiar with the concepts of the suspect and the instigator, and announced that they were now both falling into these categories. Finally, Chan-jok realized that he had fallen on his ears. At the exit from the Kenming's department, he approached the Dream Inn to apologize, but he replied that everything was fine, because in the end, everything ended quite well. Then Ken Ming wondered why the dream in the morning gave him this recorder, and how he learned that troubles were possible today. Dreamin explained that they just did not cling to him lately, so he was worried that Ken Mina could now choose his target. After Ken's dream said he was already waiting for his mother, he said goodbye and left. Hardly the dream of Ken disappeared from the field of view. The dream of Yu turned to Jaji. Hearing his voice, the guy turned and asked how everything went. Iji suggested that the junction can be imprisoned. Violence remains violence, but this method is too cruel. In any case, without recording, everything would be accused of the dream of Yu. So the girl asked where he had this recorder. Dream Yu replied that it was his father's thing. The father had a lot of fears, so even without money, he still bought similar things. Iji added that he finally saved him, and the dream in it agreed. Then Jaji asked if he was hungry and suggested that he had a snack. Soon they were already sitting in a cafe. The dream of noting that he could cook himself, but Jeji only waved, saying that he was just enjoying the food while there was opportunity. After that, she added that the dream loves pork ribs. The guy asked Jedi in surprise if she learned from his father. Iji confirmed his assumption, saying that every time he wrote in a hole, he only spoke of the dream of you. She then added that when she reported in the hatch that she became a police officer, he was glad for her, as if a native father. The dream of noting that the father would be glad even more, but Jezi confessed that she had no dad. The girl said that her parents were divorced when she was small, and her mother soon came together with another man and went. Therefore, Jeji raised her grandmother. The dream of apologizing. But Johi reassured him, noting that he had nothing to apologize because he knew nothing. She said that their parents had their neighbors once and helped them very much. Idzi said they were almost a family, so Sleep You can call her Nunoy. Returning home, the dream was spoken with Jeji on the phone. He reported that he was already at home and asked her to be careful during the trip. After talking to Jeji, the dream in thinking about what a wonderful person was and why his father never mentioned her. However, his reflection interrupted the sound of the device. Turning on the light, the guy quickly dressed and put on the device. Sleep noted that his level did not grow again, adding that nothing happened today, which would be worth reviewing. Therefore, the guy decided to immediately go to the revision the next day, where something unpleasant happened. Sleep in his class during a break, when a guy approached him and offered to make friends. The guy asked where the dream lives, explaining that he had arrived from afar and did not know the area. Sleep You did not understand what was happening, so I just noted that if the guy is about to hit him, then let him do it faster. The newcomer only asked why he was hitting the dream of the boy, and he replied that he probably jokes, and perhaps he should be hit by the first one. A newcomer asked what he had done, emphasized that only today he had transferred, and again offered friendship. This was completed. Sleep In, removing the device, still could not understand what was happening. He just communicated with a newcomer for 10 minutes. Can it be something bad? Sleep In thinking, maybe the first to strike this boy, and started his first workout. During the workout, the dream hit the newcomer, and he immediately began to apologize if suddenly did something wrong. The dream of removing the equipment, but did not understand why it happened. After all, meeting with a newcomer did not seem like the worst scenario. However, then the guy decided that evil events could not happen daily, especially with the pole. The juice was finally decided. Suddenly, the dream of realizing that nothing horrific would happen if he used workout for other purposes. During the next workout, the dream got the phone and began to look for information about the stock prices on the internet. He noticed that some shares have increased significantly in price. Dream U began to revise the prices of stocks and tried to remember them. When he finished, he removed the device and took to record the names of the shares that he remembered. After that, the dream was counted all the money left and began to estimate what benefit it would benefit if its profit was 50%. It was then that the guy realized that he could become rich with this device. Dream was studying stocks and bonds all night, but it turned out that without an adult guardian, he could not open the account. The guy could not find out the winning lottery numbers because they were only announced on Saturday at 9 in the evening. Even the ability to preview did not allow the dream to see the right moment. And annoyed, the guy rejected the phone. indignant that he could not use his strength to enrich only because he has not reached the age of majority. Suddenly, the dream of mentioned about Johnny and decided that the funds he could not dispose of himself will simply give her. The guy grabbed the phone and quickly scored her number. The guy thought that if he was able to win, he may be able to get at least half a prize. When the AG took the phone, the dream-in immediately gave her instructions what to do. Sleep in talking about stocks and advised Nune to invest all his money in one of them. However, she denied and said she would not do it. When the dream asked the reason, the girl said that as a child, her father was fond of stocks and delivered all the property from the house. This is what led to the divorce of her parents. In the end, it turned out that Nooney's father took even her piggy bank to buy a lottery ticket. According to John, the dependence on investments is more frightening than any other. However, I still asked her to trust her, assuring that this time everything would be fine. Edgy replied that at first everyone said they are sure that they will succeed in all circumstances. However, the dream of assured that this time the chance for success is 100%, and it accurately implies it. Suddenly, Eiji said in surprise that the dream-in says the same as his mother. When the dream asked what she was in mind, Eiji told how his mother Menji saved her. She was wondering how her mother learned about the location of the peel, and Menji also answered that she could predict it. Joey said that if the dream is in the right money, he could wait a little and she would give them. She is a little busy now, so she suggested that you talk a little later. Meanwhile, at school, the son of Dawn and Don Gin spoke with each other. The son of Dawn asked how things were in Asika, and Jean replied that he was talking to a lawyer. Don Jean heard that the vat juice can really be imprisoned. However, he noted that he may also have to move. When Don asked about the reason, Don Jean replied that the rumors that they were taken away by the police had already reached everyone, and his mom had no money to buy. Don's dream was worried about what to do if there is no juice vat and Don Jean moves. However, suddenly his distraction is a stranger, ordered to get out of the road. Returning, Don's dream saw a dream and who again gave the command to the boys to move away and not interfere. After going to his desk, the guy continued to look at his phone. He saw that the stocks and bonds he was watching yesterday increased in price. The dream was aware that he had to take advantage of it, but did nothing. Cursing, he struck the table with force, indignant that Jaji did not obey him. The sons of Don and Don Jin, they whisper quietly, discussed that they would both move away from here. However, the teacher came to the class and asked everyone to take place. After that, he announced that they had a new student. The guy called Kenshi, adding that he could simply be called Zani. After that, the teacher said he had to leave for a short time and suggested that you sit in a free place. Then Siank approached the dream, reached out to him, and offered to make friends. The dream was not very interested in the conversation until he did not notice that the dream was admiring the stocks, and said that he was also interesting to him. The dream indifferently noted that it was probably fun, and asked if the parents had already opened the bill to him. As suddenly something shone. Sleep asked if the Academy of Sciences could buy and sell on its own. These AC replied that, of course, it could. Stunned by these words, the dream gladly shook the boy's hand and agreed to friendship with him. The boys talked home on the way, and these AC noted that he was lucky to meet such a friend as a dream-in immediately after the transfer. He also noted that he had heard the dream of a bully by Pak Chan Juice and confirmed his excellent reputation. Dream-in just listened silently, realizing that he needed to know what the guy was. Given the previous anticipation, acquaintance with this young man promised nothing good. The dream addressed to Anna, but he corrected him, noting that it could be called for him. In this dream, he replied that such statements can lead to trouble and better refrain from such appeals. The dream of asking what the parents of this Anna's parents did, and he said they were abroad. The dream of asking if this was living alone, but learned that he lives with the butterfly. The dream in a maze at the boy, asking if he was rich, to which he replied, "That only a little." Then the Academy of Sciences added that when he returned to Korea, he would like to go with his friends to a computer club. Sono agreed to go to a computer club. When they came, it turned out that the use of the club is paid. These stables, deciding that since he brought Sono himself, he would pay for him, he began to pull money out of his wallet. Sona initially suggested paying only 2 hours, but when he saw how much money he got, stopped him quickly, assuring that only a few thousand won would be enough. He thought that the SI family was really provided if the guy is ready to spend money so easily. The dream-in wondered whether this guy showed this guy in a negative light, Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by high school students who suggested going out. One of the boys noted that they noticed them by accident and wondered if it was not too heavy in these a wallet. The young man suggested that you share money with his friends. At this point, the dream of realizing that the meeting of Siana with these boys became the worst event for him. Then suddenly, the dream of seeing how the Academy of Sciences confidently began to get the money out of the bag. Grabbing his hand, he said that he did not have a lot of money, so just scatter them. Then the high school students finally paid attention to the dream of U. Another noted that all this time the dream did not look out of their eyes. Suddenly, the other two guys realized that this dream had a conflict with the freshman Pak-chan juice. Then one of the boys began to make fun of the dream, calling him and his father crazy. Sleep warned him so that he did not dare to say so. The older guy was already going to rush to sleep, but the other guy pulled him away. Suddenly, gathering all power, this guy struck a dream in so that he was on the ground. After that, he introduced himself as Kim Yuen Min. Yuen Ming suggested that you try to break the window again and call cops, saying that nothing was afraid. He said he was indignant when someone was expelled from school for no good reason, and wondered if someone would know if the dream was simply killed. However, the boys are distracted by the Academy of Sciences, telling them just to take money and go. Bomb's dream grabbed his wallet, noticing that in a dream and a good friend, and ordered Yuen a mine to go, to which he greased that he had already intended to kill the dream of you. The boys were already going to go, but they suddenly stopped the dream of you. Immediately after the words, the dream of Yuen mine hit the guy with such force that he fell again, flew into the machine with snacks. Yuen Ming said that he was not scared by the fact that the dream was behaved like a psycho. He was convinced that without hesitation would be able to kill him and go to prison. Suddenly, a man in a strict costume who ordered the boys to stop and leave the student alone came from. Bomb's dream ordered him to leave, but when he reached for a man, he easily intercepted his wrist and turned his hand steeply. The strength of this movement forced Sunbomb to scream with pain. In the evening, the dream-in woke up at home. Next to him sat. Seeing that his friend had come to her senses, she asked if everything was fine. The dream of you seems to have not fully understood what was happening and how he was here. Having realized that the dream did not remember anything, she told how they were saved by some man. After that, the dream went to the emergency department. Doctors diagnosed him with a concussion and offered hospitalization, but he insisted on his return home. These stated that he brought a dream home, but as soon as he crossed the threshold, he immediately lost consciousness. She has suggested that you think about visiting the hospital if the sleep in the dose feels bad. However, the dream of assured that he understood everything and was fine with him, so he advised to go. These AC asked if everything was really okay. The dream-in almost melted him by the door, assuring that everything was well with him, and wished these Anu a happy road home. When the door was closed behind, the dream-in began to think aloud about how irreparable. He wondered why she decided to go at this moment when this dangerous thing was here. When the dream was put on the device, he was informed about the level of increase. He could now watch negative events the next day for 15 minutes and was able to spend 15 workouts. Viewing time today has increased to 2 hours and 10 workouts were available. Sleep stated that he first wanted to review the record of events today, asked to show what happened when he was unconscious. However, it turned out that the moments wiped out of memory could not be restored, so he asked him to show him the future. The dream was near his house when he suddenly felt a sharp back pain. Behind his back was a man in black clothes with a mask on his face, which struck a knife. The unknown immediately escaped, and although the dream tried to stop him, acute pain did not allow him to climb. Removing the device, the dream tried to understand why he was wounded with a knife. Someone had to chase him tomorrow and hit him with a knife. Sleep was hard to believe it, but he immediately started training. The next day, at school, the dream was thinking about what should happen today. About 9 p.m., in the lane leading to his home, the guy should hit a knife. Yesterday, even after 15 workouts, the dream could not catch up with the attacker. He was disturbed by the question, who was it? However, even if he learns, he will not be able to prevent the attack. The guy suddenly distracted Xi'an Academy of Sciences, which suddenly appeared with a box in which there were virtual reality glasses. He admires with admiration that he also bought the game he saw in Sleep and Home. Seeing this, the guy asked in a sharp tone whether he had dickened at his home. Later, the dream of realizing that he had exaggerated a little, because these AC just said that it was the same game. After that, the dream asked if she touched his device. He replied that he did not touch, and even more so without permission. Then, Sion AC suggested playing together and asking what game the dream likes to play. But Dream used that it was impossible because his device broke. Then SI proposed to buy a dream in a new device. Hearing this, the dream-in wondered whether they really have so much money that he can buy everything he wants. However, the Academy of Sciences replied that he just wanted to make friends with you. In response to this, the dream-in recalled that he lives in the house on the roof without parents. It seems that he did not understand the meaning of what was said. So the dream-in asked if he really thought that they could become friends and advised him to communicate with those who were equal in status. She asked what to do next. When the dream-in clarified what exactly was the question, she was aware that he needed to stand up with the dream-in friends, sleep in a great sigh, and asked if there were other friends in these Anna. To this, the Academy of Sciences replied that he had never had real friends because he was always surrounded by people who used it for their purposes. Sleep replied that he was not friends now because he was fascinated by the actions. He noted that he had heard about the account of SY and promised that he would soon tell you profitable investments. If the Academy of Sciences receives a profit, it must share half, and in case of loss, Sleep will return the money to him. She just smiled and said that it was not necessary to return the money. He asked when the dream would explain where to invest. He replied that he could tell it very soon. That evening, the guy left the store. He thought mentally that he was still cold at night and dreamed of becoming rich to finally buy a filter for water. Sleep In admitted that he no longer wants to choose what water to buy in the store. He also did not want to think of death. At the same moment, someone suddenly hit him with a knife from his back. The striker instantly bounced to the side, not understanding what was happening. The dream, turning, began to unbutton the jacket under which the bulletproof vest and asked the attacker if he had never seen such a thing. Dream you told that it got it this morning. Because of that guy, he lost 300,001, although he did not have money. The attacker did not realize how the dream in learning about the attack. But yet, swinging, tried to strike him. However, the dream has managed to put a bottle of water to block the attack. The dream in a tricky bottle, forcing the knife to fall out of the arms of the attacker, and threw it away. Recognizing that this is not the end because the enemy had another knife, he tensed, preparing for a new attack. He took the second bottle in his hands. He boldly stated that the stranger would never be able to kill him. With these words, stretching his hand with a bottle forward, he rushed forward on his attacker. The dream rushed at his attacker, and he, staring, glowed to the ground. Swirling, the guy stood up instantly and rushed. The dream rushed after him, but was too slow and could not catch the offender in any of the 15 workouts. However, even then he was not going to give up. However, the attacker suddenly stopped and turned. The dream was stunned, because the guy would have to run away. But now this type has moved directly to the sleep. The dream was going to escape, but broke up and fell. Without wasting time, the other guy tried to attack in a dream, but he had time to intercept his hands. Sleep in expressing the desire to know who would kill him, even if he dies right before it. Suddenly, JG appeared in the lane. The girl reported that she was from the police and ordered the attacker to throw a weapon. She warned that in case of disobedience, she would have to use force. After that, the guy who attacked the dream in quickly rose and escaped. Iji instantly found herself next to Sleep In, asking if everything was fine with him, and in parallel examining him for possible damage. After a while, Nuna and Dream were in his home. Idzi noted that she wanted to talk to Sleep after work and came in time. Edie asked if he saw a dream in the attacker's face and whether he had an assumption who could be. However, the dream was thinking that this guy always escaped, but never attacked twice. During the preliminary examination, the events that the guy saw did not true. Iji, noticing the silence of Sleep In, noted that he, apparently, is in a state of shock, because she could not even speak normally. However, the guy assured that everything was fine. Then, Eiji asked about the bulletproof vest and how the dream was learned about such danger. He explained that this equipment got from his father. He explained that sometimes he is scary, so he decides to wear this equipment from time to time. Idzi assured, the next day when she goes to work, she will check the surveillance cameras to find out who is actually guilty. After that, the girl stretched out the boy with a small envelope with money, remembering how he recently asked her financial assistance. She realized that he apparently ended up pocket money. At this point, the dream asked if Jedi was not interested in investments. Nuna only spoke dissatisfied with how sleep you can break this topic again when he has just died. However, the dreamin asserts that he would work out and asked only one, to believe him at least once. However, Joji insisted on her, claiming that he could succeed at least 10, at least 100 times. But in the end, she risks losing everything at a time. The girl compared it with chess, where instead of figures, money, and emphasized that the dream of you should not even start. The dream did not understand why none was against it, but remembering the change in the course of today's events, quietly said he could not be mistaken. Suddenly, the policewoman pulled him something. When the dream asked that this, JG replied that she was an electric shover and advised to use it as needed, and she had a second. She said she was worried about sleeping because he has had trouble with him lately, so she advised to lock the door and go to bed more firmly. After that, JG left. When the dream turned on the device a little later, he ordered the moment when someone tried to kill it. He tried to find out who was the guy. This man was about 180 centimeters height, or slightly higher. Shoes are ordinary sneakers, and all the clothes, including a cap and face mask, were black, so it was difficult to see something in the dark. Suddenly, the dream noticed that the attacker had wireless headphones. Then the dream of realizing why this guy at training always avoided him, and this time he decided to attack again. Sleep also noticed the tattoo on the attacker's foot. It has become a major hint, but finding a criminal only for a tattoo will not be easy. Sleep decided to continue the experiment and asked him to show him an unfavorable event the next day. He got into a lesson where nothing special happened. This meant that no problems were foreseen, so the dream in deciding to check the state of affairs with stocks. He needed to remember only 3 shares that were in the top. After that, he called the Anna and asked him to come to school a little earlier. The next day, the dream in the CO of the action that should be invested in, and reminded that in the case of profit, the SI should share half. If the situation is the opposite, the dream will return the money to him. After that, the guy wondered how much money she would be able to invest. He replied that he could not be able to put only 10 million now. But the dream noted that he could assume that he had made money in Siana, and suggested starting from $1 million. After classes, the Academy of Sciences was delighted to show a dream in his income, saying that he earned 3 million. These ACs also asked how the dream you determined where to invest, to which he replied that he studied the stock market for a long time. The AC noted that they were sorry that they did not put 10 million, because then they would earn 30. Dream In agreed with him and asked him to send him the promised 1.5 million, but she replied that he had no card. Therefore, he suggested giving a dream to everything he has now, and the rest promises to return tomorrow. Seeing how the Academy of Sciences passed to him 500,000, the dream-in asked if it is dangerous to carry such an amount with him in cash, and is not easier to get a bank card. Cyan smiled and thanked the dream for being worried about him. But the dream replied that he should not worry about a guy born under a happy star. After that, the Academy of Sciences asked if they could repeat the same tomorrow. When the dream wondered what he was in mind, she suggested that the next time put 10 million at once. Sitting at home in the evening, the dream in his hands was the envelope that he gave him. He recalled how she warned him not to get involved in investment. Putting the envelope in place, the dream in his hands took 500,000, which he handed over to him. He remembered how he suggested that he invest as many as 10 million next time. Sleep is hesitant whether it is worth continuing this case. He sat down in the device and he decided to find out what would happen next. The system informed the guy that his level decreased from the 6th to the 5th. He did not understand why it happened, but it turned out that his level was directly related to experience. Therefore, depending on his experience, the level can both increase and decrease. Instead, I thought that for the first time in a long day, the day passed calmly. But suddenly, everything changed. The system began to list current skills and proposed to review the events of today. However, the dream refused and asked to show him the future. He found himself in an abandoned building when he unexpectedly heard someone's cries for help. He saw a young man tied to a pillar and asked who he was. He was called a dream. When the dream was removed from his head, he recognized one of the high school students who recently robbed this Anna. Baum's dream also recognized the dream of and accused him of trying to steal him for revenge for the past beating. He recalled that he was not he, but Un. However, the dream of was completely confused because he had no reason to abduct Baum's dream. In response, the Dream by Bomb asked the boy to release him. Dream Yu asked to wait a little, and, taking a fragment of the bottle, began to cut all the knots. Kolam's dream all the time, he drove the young man, and at some point released, pushed the Dream of Yu. The guy flew down and fell on one of the beams. Sleep shouted in pain, removing the device. He could not understand why Bomb's dream did so, because the dream in fact saved him. Then the guy decided to start the workout. During training, Sleep In decided not to solve Bomb's dream. First, he needs to find out the cause. He struck the Bomb's dream in his chest and said that if he did not want to die from his hand, then it is better to reply honestly. Dream in asking that a bad dream of a Boom did today. He replied that he took 1,000,001 at the school and asked, because of it they were so treated. The Dream asked who was this Hube, and Boom replied that he seemed to be his name, and promised to return everything, only would be saved. The Dream could not believe that he stole this guy only because he robbed this Anna. Dream Yu approached Bomb's dream, asking if he was drunk. Boom's dream confessed that he drank a little, and immediately apologized. Not to mention a word, the dream of the Bomb's dream on all sides began to carefully consider. At first, he did not notice anything special, but suddenly something attracted his attention. The next day, the Dream was walking in the school, talking with a phone with UN men. Boom asked what happened and why he did not appear. The guy asked if they had fun with those who escaped, and then said that he was going to borrow money from a guy with whom they recently met in a computer club and asked if it was worth caught. Bomb's dream reported that he learned the name and class in which this guy studied. He turned out to be a freshman from the 7th grade, Kion Shi. After that, he put the phone, broke into the classroom, and invited Siana to go for a minute. Already in the corridor, Sai asked what a Boom wanted from him. He asked why she was so strict at once and added that he was saved then, or more precisely, a passerby. The Dream remarked that the passerby was truly strong and his hand still hurts. He confessed that he had previously played sports and injured his shoulder, which now reminded himself of himself. The guy said it had happened through the Anna and asked him to pull his wallet. By the Dream, he sharply grabbed his wallet from his hands and called Siana Dobryak. Seeing a bunch of money, the Dream of Bomb decided that these Academy of Sciences, apparently, was really wealthy, and offered him a favorable agreement. He suggested that he give him half his money every day. Bomb said that he was a bully and became angry unless he did not deliberately bring money. He added that if someone is tossing this Anna, then you need to turn to him and he will immediately study them. By the Dream of a full name, saying that only the mention of him would make everyone tremble with fear. But suddenly, a Dream of you. Seeing him, Boom asked what he needed, and did not come to be asked to kill him again. To which the guest replied that last time it was only a clouding of the mind. The Dream noticed that the laces had been untied in Bomb's dream, and suggested that they tie them as an apology. Boom decided that the Dream of Y seemed to have come to his senses after a fight with a mint, and allowed him to tie the laces. Sleep drew attention to the fact that Bomb's dream is very strong muscles. Bomb's dream explained that he had previously engaged in athletics. He had a lightning tattoo on his ankle. Dream stated that he had left the matter, and a Dream by Bomb, before leaving, said to listen to him in the future. The Dream, left alone with his thoughts, realized that he now had evidence. It was a dream of a Boom, who attacked him that night. That evening, Boom's dream went out of the bar again, talking on the phone. One guy noted that he had drank 3 bottles of South on his own. Boom's dream was only due to his willpower. However, in any case, he found Hube, which would become his living bank, and later he planned to get some more money. The young man said something about the dogs when suddenly someone crashed from behind and hit him with an electric shooter. The dream of the unconscious lay on the earth, and the Dream in, satisfied with the success of his plan, was convinced that no one saw them. Now he only had to move Bomb's dream to another place. The dream of saying that last night the Dream of Boom communicated with someone through the headphone, and then everything went wrong as planned. The guy could not understand who he was and why he tried to kill him. But today the Dream was decided to find out. At the time, it was too dark on the street. The guy tried to call someone for help because he did not want to stay linked in a dark room. The guy in black thought about how during the night training in a preliminary view, he made every effort to find out who ordered him to strike a knife. They threatened him and beat him, trying to find out the whole truth, even to torture. But that guy stubbornly refused to reveal the truth. Even if he was handed over to police, they will not be able to incriminate him, because he had no evidence. The young man thought all night, and finally he managed to come up with something. The next moment, the young man grabbed a hostage's foot to check that his reasoning was true. The young man said that he was most likely not only done. The next moment, the young man began to ask about the tattoo. It was ready for everything so that he was not touched. He was quite angry because he wanted the answers only to the question. The hostage only explained that in high school he was in a team in athletics, where they, together with the team, decided to make the same tattoos. The guy was not delighted with the fact that people with the same tattoos had about 10. He sought to find out their names to find them soon. Suddenly, the guy called Kion these Angs, and he felt his hands trembled. He immediately reached for the phone, guessing that something was wrong. The young man was so alert that his eyes looked like big buttons. Taking the phone, he saw a guy who was deeply frightened by what was happening around. The guy immediately rushed to the exit, leaving his hostage in complete misunderstanding of what happened. The boy was asked for help because his friend became a hostage to an unknown man. On his phone screen, it was visible how his friend was beaten, which was why he had blood flowing from his nose. He could not contact him before, so he just started worrying. At first, the guy went home, but suddenly he was brought to the same room where he was then. The guy was increasingly shocked by what happened at that moment. However, the guy did not guess that at that moment the man heard everything and was somewhat stunned. The man warned him, "If he goes to the police, it will be his end." The guy could find out where they were, just at that moment. The next day, he had to come to the place at the same hour. Otherwise, if he could not find him, he would kill him. The young man immediately rushed to the assigned place, seeking the next day to get there. At that time, the hostage was in some room and was looking forward to releasing, because he also wanted to the toilet. Although it was late evening, the street lanterns clearly illuminated the darkness of the streets. The guy went into his house rapidly and closed the front door with a crack. Even then, he could not turn to the police, because he did not imagine how he could find him until tomorrow and where he to know where to look. The guy was very frightened by the situation, but suddenly he remembered the object lying nearby. He immediately realized that apparently that man knew about his ability to see the future. He saw a building illuminated by a single lantern in the dark. The guy was held in this building. He was watched by two men sitting on the bed. Only he started making some sounds. Men immediately added a little more ribbon to his mouth. They did not beat him too much, but they could not understand where so much blood came from. One of the men was worried. Whatever the situation may be, or will it be too risky? If something goes to the plan, will it pull it all to the bottom? But the man immediately covered his mouth so that he did not say unnecessary. However, the man was aware that in the past, something has done something. After all, he once did something much worse than what happened at this moment, only a few days ago in a luxurious room. That day, he received an advance of 5 million won. If everything goes well, another 5 million will be waiting for it. The next day, he had to find a guy from a photo and hit him with a knife. However, the man advised him to take 2 knives just in case. The guy was a little surprised what was happening. He thought the guy was scared if he sees him inadequate behavior and would ask to stop his life. In the next moment, the boys began to fight, and one of them stated that he would kill the other. In various words and methods, he tried to offend him continuously. He recognized the young man and realized that he was Hubes from his school, the guy who was deducted from an accident. If everything was fine, he would have accepted him and all the fugitives' children to himself. He was also wondering whether there was a future for neighboring robbery children. The guy hesitated why he was instructed to attack this man. The man was terribly angry with the boy for his inappropriate questions and threw a subject from him, emphasizing that the order came from the management, and therefore they were obliged to fulfill it. He knew that the guy was athlete, which means he was running quickly. He only had to use a knife and escape as soon as possible. The man handed him something into his hands and ordered the task. It seemed that the young man wanted to get something again, because the man handed him the wireless headphones, which he had to just wear and wear. Yesterday, the dream of learned that they were trying to injure him with a knife, so he put on a bulletproof vest, and the police appeared suddenly. He was wondering who exactly gave that order and for what purpose. In addition, John's dream and knew this place and had to come there. But he did not leave the feeling that something was wrong. He was afraid of fear, and he did not know if he had to surrender at that moment. At that moment, it was extremely scary to stay in that room alone. He tried to call for help, wishing that at last someone would come to his rescue. But suddenly the guy told him that he was standing directly. If he answered one question, the guy would let him go. The hostage was ready to answer any questions, so that it was only to leave the room. The guy sought to find out the location of the fugitive Yu and Mina. One of the men was very sleepy, but they patiently waited to arrive their order with food. Another man who was sitting nearby explained to him that less than 10 minutes had passed since the order. But suddenly the door knocked on the door, explaining that it was delivery. The man was impressed with the speed of delivery and rejoiced that they would finally be able to eat. But suddenly the guy took off the mask and explained to the man that they were asked to find them. And for the next moment, John's dream hit him with an electric shock in his chin. Another man realized that something was suspicious, so he went to the rescue. He was ready to strike at once because his friend lay on the floor. However, the guy cleverly flashed past the man, as well as by the one who was lying on the floor. The man did not have time to understand how it happened, because everything happened so rapidly. The next moment, the guy struck a man who immediately fell on the floor. But it was at that moment that the third man ran to the door where all this happened. The guy lying on the floor was pleading with Kim Yoo and Mina for help because he was frozen as if he were paralyzed. The man was amazed by the fact that the guy was able to come. But even so, it would be impossible to defeat the dream because he knew everything in advance. He knew all this and understood that he would never be able to win. The next moment, the fan, standing next to the man, flew towards the guy. And at the same moment, the guy rushed to flee from the fan, as far as possible. He had the same tattoo as hostage. Chan Sleep-in tried to stop the man, but he continued to escape. The guy exclaimed, insisting that Kim Yuen-ming finally listened to him. Chan Sleep-in had in any way to catch up with the man before he hides again. He passionately wished him to die right in the eyes of the dream of you. The young man warned him that if he chose this path, he would die immediately. But the man did not understand where the young man could know it, because it looked extremely strange. But in the next moment, the young man explained that if a man leaves the lane, he would be on an 8-striking road. The man began to shout at him because he was worried about where the young man could know such information. But first of all, the dream sought to find out who exactly ordered this man to hit him with a knife. This question did not give him rest. The guy repeated the question twice, but the man just mocked him a little, because if he really is all-knowing, then it seems that he could not know it. His training ended at that moment, and he did not imagine how the events would develop. So first it was necessary to calm down. And he sought to give the impression that nothing happened between them that day, especially that he had stabbed him last time and stole it, Anna. He did not plan to report to the police. Its purpose was only to pick up the SI and disappear, but if that man will still let him go, Khan will kill him. The guy did not understand who was talking about, and it surprised him a little. But the man couldn't tell him anything, because if he did it, he would be killed. The guy wanted to tell him and helped him, because he already knew about his abilities. But he was afraid of him, so he escaped. The man only wanted him to silence and said nothing more. The guy could not understand who the man actually spoke with until he turned to him. But in the next moment, the guy noticed that in his ears of his interlocutor were headphones. Initially, the guy wanted to remove the headphones because he realized that he was given instructions through them. The man suddenly whispered quietly into the headphones, asking for help. The guy was surprised by the behavior of the man, because he did not understand why he whispered something in headphones. The next moment, the guy's headphones suddenly exploded. The guy was stunned by what was happening before his eyes. In the next moment, the man rejected a few meters from the guy. The guy screamed loudly, seeing the face of a man who was completely burned. Subsequently, the guy was already sitting near the police station. The guy was worried about the man, but he just said that he was abducted and beaten, so he needed to take care of himself on his own. They sat in the gazebo, savoring coffee after a terrible night. The boy noticed that the guy looks even worse than him. It seemed strange to the boy that he could look great once after a person died right in front of him. How much time has passed with his father's funeral? Why is it constantly happening to him? The guy asked the dream of a dream and whether he wanted to stay with him at home. The guy had already told his father about what had happened, and he put the guard on him. During the investigation, he learned that recently the guy also got into dangerous situations. The guy considered this idea much better than staying alone in the roof room. The next moment, Nuna invited John Don to discuss everything. She was also called from the hospital and reported that Kim Yuen-ming died during surgery. The guy could not understand that he was a headphone, capable of killing a person in a moment. The Judicial and Medical Service, which rests with the fugitives, must understand this. They also plan to interrogate everyone who is near Kim Yuen-min. The next moment, the girl approached the boy, thinking that he was also very scared. In addition, Nuna wanted to find out where his guardian was because the boy's parents were abroad at that time. The boy explained that Kim pastor would come soon. The girl suggested that the boy was visiting the church because his guardian is a pastor. But at the same moment, he pulled the car and stopped right near the same gazebo where they sat. A girl who turned to the boy as a young owner and asked him to get in the car came out of the car. The boy said goodbye and the boy sat in the car. The girl was amazed when she learned that his family was extremely wealthy. The young man decided that the investigation is completed and can now do his business. But the next moment, the girl explained that Kim Yuen Ming, who attacked a young man with a knife, died. His head exploded from an unknown substance, and the young man was the only witness to this event. Although her words may seem sharp, he was also suspected of killing Kim Yuen Mina. Regardless of the cause of the abduction and threats to Bom's dream, it is undeniable that she was responsible for him. That is why, from that day, he began to live in her home. The guy did not understand why he should go to a girl who lives alone, but she just laughed when he called her a girl. She explained that she was often busy with work, so it is rarely home. In addition, it was a police order. The girl lived in a large lighthouse. He barely crossed the threshold of the girl's apartment. The guy was a little stunned. There were a lot of questions about the girl's dream in John, but he was most interested in whether she was her home or a gym. The girl showed the room that was empty where he could unpack and use her things. The guy immediately entered the room and closed the door to the castle so that no one could go. He had no choice, but staying in the police house was definitely the best solution. He was also wondering whether the device would work elsewhere. As the guy took the device in his hands, he was suddenly activated. The guy was worried if the girl had heard something by accident. He decided to check if the girl heard something extra, but at this time she was playing sports. The guy was convinced that nothing was heard from the outside, but he was pleased that the device was functioning there. His father greeted the guy with a rise to the 7th level, but he was surprised that in just a day he could rise at 2 levels. The young man also gained a new skill. He could listen to audio for high volume for 10 seconds. However, he did not understand the essence of this skill and how it functions. In the next moment, his father explained to him that with the help of Preview, he could increase the volume of the desired episode and listen to it. The guy immediately realized how this skill works and immediately came up with how to use it. The guy immediately ordered a preview of yesterday's conversation with Kim Eun-min. He was very interested when Kim Yuen-ming suddenly began to angry and put his hand to his ear, as if trying to hear something. The guy did not realize that Kim Yuen-ming could hear someone's voice while talking. Chan Sleep-in heard the guy explained in the headphone that it was his last warning, and if he did not obey, he should return and run. Otherwise, it will become a corpse. In the next moment, the guy activated his hearing skill for 10 seconds. The guy realized that the head had not accidentally exploded. Someone intentionally arranged it. He remembered that it happened last time the guy struck him with a knife. The person who stood behind all this changed the situation compared to the one he saw in the previous view. As it turned out, this person had even more abilities than even he knew, including the ability to see the future. The guy decided to look in tomorrow and see the harbinger of unpleasant events. The guy immediately noticed that he was in the room, gorgeously decorated, and did not understand where he was. A little later, the guy noticed the blood for which someone's hand clutched. In a moment, Chan Sleep-in heard a familiar voice. It was the voice of a girl standing, holding on to the wounded belly. A moment later, the girl suddenly fainted and fell on the floor. The guy immediately rushed to her to help. The eyes of Jedi Nuni were barely open. They still glowed signs of life. The guy kept a girl who was already unconscious and signs of life. Inside, it covered simultaneous disappointment and shock. In the morning, when the dream went out to the kitchen, he saw Nuna cooking something in a blender. When asked what it was, JG answered that she was drinking Detox Sick instead of breakfast. She reached out to a glass to taste it, adding that this drink would make him strong. Instead, the guy had memories of yesterday's preview, and the color of the drink reminded him of the blood. Noticing that he was silent, JG asked what had happened and whether he liked the drink, adding that it was good for health. The dream in a sudden asked Nuna to put on a bulletproof vest when she went to work. She did not understand why she'd wear such a difficult thing all day because it was inconvenient. But the dream of assured that it was only today, asked if none could fulfill this request. The girl answered that she would solve this situation and advised the boy to prepare for school. Then the dream opened in the phone some app and showed it Nuni, asking to install. When she asked what it was, the dreamin explained that it was an application to determine the place of stay of family or friends, and that in this way they would be able to know where each of them is. The guy explained that he was just worried. JG thought it could be because of the events of yesterday. Nuna asked if this was enough for sleeping. He nodded back, confirming it. At school, the guy did not find a place, thinking that even if he knew where Nuna was, he could still not follow the police all day and persuade her to wear a bulletproof vest. The dream of knowing that the death of Joey would come at about 3:45. There was not even the second one at the moment, and he had something to do for John Nuna. However, in the initial review of Nunu already hit, and no matter how the dream was trained, he could not be released. The guy drew an approximate plan of the room and thought where it could be. He thought of calling Nuni and telling everything, but doubted if she would believe him. Therefore, he did not know how to do. The guy's reflections interrupted these NAC, approaching the dream of you to find out if there are new stocks and when they start. However, Sleep You replied that it was not on time now. Suddenly, this NAC noticed the drawing of the guy, saying that it was the interior of the salon, and praised him for the ability to draw. Paying attention to some details, she became convinced that it was a salon, and asked if strange uncles would usually visit, dreaming asking where these AC knows about this place. He explained that as a child, his mother worked in such an institution. These AC mentioned that, while my mother was on the change, he ate on his own and played in a similar room. Then the dream asked if there were gangsters in such places or people like them. She replied that he did not know, but in his childhood he met many dangerous and scary men. Sleep in Silence thought whether it was worth checking whether these people were there, and concluded that he would not help on his own. Suddenly, the Academy of Sciences got a call. Hearing the boys' conversation and the words that before leaving school to these Anna, someone was waiting. The dream in a worrying man asked who it could be. She answered that he was his uncle Yan Ho and a security guard. Dreamin asked who he was talking about, and these Academy of Sciences explained that his father had put a guard on him. It was exactly the one who saved them when classmates tried to take money from Anna. Sleep noted that if he was a guard, then he probably beats well. She said he was saying he was the best in this matter. She was already about to say that if someone offends a dream-in, let him tell him, but did not have time to treat. Dreaming in his hand and asked for help. Without explaining anything, he just said that a person's life is in danger and urgent support was needed. Meanwhile, Johnny was in a rather luxurious hotel. She introduced herself to the administrator as a police officer and asked if Joe Gun-san was located inside. The radio administrator clarified the presence of Gun-san Han and then pointed the girl on the right door, passing her inside. Seeing John, Joe Gun wondered if she did not detect from their company and asked who she was. The girl preferred not to answer and asked if this man was known by the student of the UN Mina. The man pretended not to know who he was talking about. Joey quickly explained that it was an 18-year-old student who died yesterday. Joey reported that the police had information that Joe Gun had been in contact with UN, a minor, shortly before the tragedy. However, the man apologized and explained that through business, he was forced to communicate with many people. Then Edzi got the phone and reported that they had restored the device of the deceased, finding one entry there. The policeman turned on the record and asked to listen carefully. The record was clearly heard how UN Mines confessed that he had stolen the second John sleep-in, eventually executing the order. Joe Guna's voice is also heard, who emphasizes that the uniform has just completed this task, will tell him the good news. After the entry was completed, Eddie said that the voice on the film was very similar to Joe Guna's voice. She added that if Joe Gun confesses to the committed, it would be taken into account in court and invited him to the investigation department. Then the man sighed heavily and said nervously that he was warned by a mine not to leave any evidence, but he did not listen to him. Joe Gun got a knife and ordered the girl to retreat from him. However, the girl was not afraid. She took a defensive position, surprised by the boldness with which he dared to lift the weapon to the police officer from the investigative department of the main directorate. The man did not give this value and shouted that the edge deserved it. He rushed at her, but she managed to evade. The policeman grabbed him by his hand, attracted to herself, and hit his elbow on her nose. The weapon slipped out of the hands of Joe Guna, and he fell to the floor, holding on to a hammered place. Iji rejected the knife and loudly thought that she was not aware of the ability of local bandits to make small bombs. She asked Joe, whom he works for and who gives him orders. Iji again demanded the answer, twisting his hands behind his back. She warned that if he continued to remain silent, they would already talk to the department, and wondered why he threatened a police officer. Suddenly, someone else came into the room. Meanwhile, the reception unexpectedly approached the dream and greeted. He asked to open the door, assuring that he would only quickly do one thing and turn out. However, ignoring the boy's request, the manager only noted that he came in school form, knowing where he got, and ordered to go away. However, the Dream Inn remained adamant, stating that he would only go after he checked something. The man ignored him again, which made a dream in exploding. When you are asked to open something, do what they say, because he has no time. The manager, without holding on, pushed the guy, saying that he had no right to appear here and put his order. The man grabbed a Dream in his hair and pulled him away, threatening that he would kill him. Suddenly, this was broke into the room, ordered to leave him by a friend alone. When asked by a man who he was, these Academy of Sciences did not pay attention and quickly rushed to sleep in to find out if everything was fine. When I realized that these Anne is a friend of Dream, the manager threatened that she was waiting for the same fate. Suddenly, this Anne AC shouted and called his guard. At this point, a tall man came to the room and ordered the door to open with a calm look. The manager, with dissatisfied exclamations, moved to Ian Ho, but he raised him in the air with a sharp blow. The man flew to the floor and fell to the floor, and the Ho Ho again ordered the door to open. The manager was helplessly muffed. Then En Ho threatened that if the door would not open now, he would do it and go inside. Sleep quickly ran to the head lying on the floor, asking for the place of Nuna. The policeman tried to find out, but the man could not say a word. Then En hoked it for his hair and collar, forcing him to answer. A frightened man said that the police officer was in the 6th room. When the Dream flew into the right room, he immediately saw Ag Nuna, who sat near the wall, pressing his wound on his stomach. The girl began to ask how the Dream was here, but he quickly interrupted her, explaining that he had to do everything possible to change the future. Suddenly, dissatisfied voices came from the corridor, and in a moment, a crowd of people with battles gathered near the door. Not friendly at all. Seeing this, Yen Ho pushed this Anna into the room and ordered not to go out until he finished. As soon as the door closed behind him, the man immediately attacked all the bandits who gathered in the hallway. One of the attackers tried to hit Yen Horty, but he cleverly evaded. The next movement, he hit the attacker with great force into his stomach. Yen Ho easily evaded all attacks, scattering the attackers on the sides with incredible force. Meanwhile, in the room, the Academy of Sciences had already held a phone and said he was calling the police now, to which Nuno replied that support was already on the road. Then Nuna noticed how the guy was shaking, put her hand on his cheek and asked to calm down and to tell him honestly how he got here. She smiled and assured that she could help if he was frank. After a while, the Dream in the police station, in the interrogation room, a man entered the room, greeted and introduced. The main detective named Q's Dream Tek. Seeing him, the Dream at once asked how things were in Jeji Nuna. Tek's Dream replied that the Dream in saving her life, because a little more, and help could be late. Sitting opposite the boy, the Dream of Tek proposed to talk again and noted that today the Dream in felt something suspicious, so she followed the detective of Jedi. The man said that the tire detective was handed over to him. Then he continued, saying that when a critical situation had a critical situation in the detective, the Dream took with him a telecrantor and a school friend, because he was indifferent. The Dream, in a calm, asked whether or did not do something wrong. The Tek's Dream assured that everything was in order, because the Dream in saving the life of a police officer, for which he deserves a reward. However, he noted that this was the 4th case when he has been in the police recently. The Tek's Dream, bending his fingers, began to count and asked if the Dream would not interfere with the investigation. He noted that if you consider it logically, such events are too frequent to consider them simply bad or accidental. Suddenly, the phone rang in a dream. After spending a few minutes in a conversation, he put a tube and reported that they are completing today. So sleep can go. However, he stressed that sooner or later all the secrets became explicit, and warned him that he, as a child, should not deal with the police. Later, the Dream was in the hospital. Sitting near Nuna, he asked if she was fine with her, and she replied that, of course, no. The Dream asked if the wound hurts, but Idzi replied that the case was not in pain, but that she dropped the suspect directly under her nose. Jogun fled, and was injured by a knife in a mask. AG mentioned that the news had already been reported how a personal security guard saved the detective. She added that she intervened that she was removed from her jurisdiction from the investigation. She was so ashamed that it was difficult to lift her eyes. Hearing this, the Dream Inn immediately apologized. The girl suggested talking again and asked, did not he insist in the morning that she would wear a bulletproof vest? She also wondered where he knew that something could happen to her. However, the guy assured that this would not happen again and added that he heard Noonie would have to spend about a month in the hospital. Then he wished her to rest. At 11th in the evening, the alarm clock rang in a dream, and the device turned on. But he did not want to wear it. Nevertheless, the notification was not tired of reminding him of it again and again. Angry, the dream in the storage box with the device. The guy murmured evil words that the preliminary view will not show the bad events that can happen tomorrow. He wondered if it would be better to live his destiny in loneliness. Sleep stated that it would no longer allow any of the loved ones to be injured or died. Grabbing one of Nuna's dumbbells, he wanted to break the device, but suddenly frozen, unable to move. After a while, the guy sat in the car of Siana as he wanted to talk. She said that Yenku reported to his father's event, and they could not do anything with the news. Dreamyu asked to convey to his father an apology for drawing Siana into a dangerous situation. He suggested that his father probably worried about him while he was abroad. So the dream asked if he came here to say goodbye and say that they would no longer be able to communicate. However, Anna denied and wondered if there was a dream in a clairvoyant. When the dream wondered what it was in mind, this Anna explained that it was a person who was like a shaman who was able to see the future. However, the dreamer denied that it was not true. And then Anna added that his father was interested in such things. Sleep stated that there was nothing wrong with this, and a child like him could not turn something like this, because it is an adult, such as police. So, the dream advised the boy to forget about it and went. At this moment, the dream was in an abandoned building. Suddenly, he was called, and from one of the columns came Joe Gun-san. The man asked if the TK's dream was sure that everything would go smoothly if he seems. The Tekka's dream ordered his hands to raise and then asked if he struck the knife of the Iji tire detective. The man replied that he was not him. He only threatened and tried to escape. Tek's dream asked who it was and whether it was a guy from his office. Joe Gunn immediately denied that, although they have a bad reputation in the area, but who would come to mind so far as to kill a defenseless detective? Tek's dream stated that he was confident in the inevitable elimination of the entire gang of Chogun. Therefore, he had to tell who was behind it, especially given that he contacted the detective to confess. Jogun replied that the guy who hit the tire, Johi, was in a mask, so it is difficult to identify. It also eradicates all records from surveillance cameras. Jogun reported that the guy who struck the tire of Johi was in a mask, so it was difficult to recognize. This person also wiped all the records from the surveillance cameras. Jogun stated that he wanted to confess to the murder of Unina, and confessed that in fact someone had ordered him to kill Chan Dream of You. Dream TK did not understand what Jogun was saying and asked to explain, but he replied that he was risked by life if he was talking. However, the Dream of Tech insisted on his own. And then Jogun finally said, he began a story about how someone ordered him to force Unina Mine to kill Chong Sleep Yu. However, the UN Ming made mistakes because, seeking success, you face constant pressure. Jogun said it was a superior's that he could not refuse and could not do anything because the instructions were only transferred to him. The Dream of Teak asked who it was, but as soon as Jogun began to answer, the detective pulled out his weapon and shot him with one shot. The detective then noted that Jogun knew about his fate, if he spoke, and asked why he risked. Suddenly, a call came. The detective reported that he had got rid of the pursuers, as stated, assured that he would keep the secret. Going to school, the Dream was thinking why he did not use the device last night, although he could not break it. On the way, the guy communicated with Nuna. He promised to visit the hospital after lessons and asked if she needed any help. Suddenly, the guy noticed how a motorcycle rushed on him. He did not have time to bounce and fell. The driver, when stopping, asked if he was fine with him and boiled. On the street, it is necessary to look forward. As he was approaching school, sleep and how he almost got under the car and believed that it was a common matter. He decided that the worst was happening today, but suddenly he hit a football ball. Dreamin thought it could be an accident, despite the apology of the boys who hit him with the ball on his face. Sitting in the classroom, he did not find a place, fearing every bundle. These AC drew attention to it and asked what was with him. Because since he came to school, he did not say a word and looked pale. However, the Dream of assured that he was just worried. She asked what it was anxious, but the Dream of replied that everything was fine. However, the Academy of Sciences noticed that something was wrong with the boy, and noted that what he sees does not look normal. Sleep was convinced that he could withstand it, but suddenly the fire alarm. However, everyone quickly reassured, explaining that the system simply failed. CNAC suddenly noted that the dream was disappeared, and then noticed how he hid under the desk. The dream of trembling with fear and pleaded with Anna to help. Returning home, the dream of calling John Nooney to inform you that it is feeling bad and will not be able to come today. He also clarified that he was going home in Siana car. All this time, CNAC watched a friend carefully, and then asked if he had a dream in a panic disorder or something like that. Otherwise, why is he so afraid and worried for no apparent reason? But the dream and thought that such a rich man like this would never understand him, because he has not known the true sense of fear. These AC always went to school by car, and a security guard was constantly near him, who could deal with dozens of gangster. Dream believed that if he once managed to become wealthy, he would be able to get rid of fears. When they arrived, the dream of thanking Sianu for transportation, and he suggested calling if the dream was needed. Due to the excitement for sleep, he could not even lunch and now feels hungry. The young man believed that once he was at home, nothing would happen, and decided to prepare ramen. But just going to turn on the gas, it suddenly covered the idea that gas could explode. Therefore, he decided to eat ramen raw without cooking it. But soon the guy began to sleep in a dream. He could not fall asleep in the previous night because of excitement. So, having milked food, Sleep-In decided to relax. It rains on the street. John stood in a single shorts in hand, and the man before him noted that he was damp here and suggested that he finish sooner. The man wondered if there was any evidence, but the whole replied that he had no. Angry about this comment, the man hit him with his leg, deciding that he was mocking him. The man said he was Monje Khan and asked if this unusual policeman was really leaving without leaving a trace. He stated that until the whole would say what is needed, he would not receive the desired. Suddenly, one of the handies stretched out a phone that came to. After the conversation, the man decided to spare Chong in the hose, but warned that he would hold his tongue behind his teeth, even if he knew something. Then he wondered how many years the sun of this year turned. Dream in a sudden woke up with a loud cry. The guy realized that it was only a dream, but he seemed too realistic to him. The guy recalled that he was his father when he was 5 years old. However, his thoughts interrupted the notification asking for a device. Not knowing what to do next, he suddenly remembered how they earned 3 million in stocks with these. Then the dream decided that he also wanted to become rich to have his own guard. This would give Niaj Nune to give up the dangerous work of the policeman. Put on the device, the dream of saw his father and reported that the most important thing is the bad event of tomorrow. However, the system replied that this team was unknown to her. Then the dream was ordered to show him the details of this event. Sleep in the house of Siana, where many delicious dishes were flashing on the table. Looking at the clock, he noticed that it had come 7 o'clock in the evening. During the preview, they just dinner, and nothing happened. And then the dream mentioned that the exchange market was closed at 7 in the evening. He decided to take advantage of training to view and memorize promotions. The next day, the dream Yu approached Siana. He noted that the dream was looking good and asked if everything was fine with him. But the dream immediately went to the case, reminding that last time these Academy of Sciences said they could put 1,000,000 in the action. She smiled and said that even 150 million could now invest. Then the dream in showed him all the important stocks, proposing to distribute investments between these 3 companies. The young man noted that the conditions remain the same as before. Regardless of profits or losses, half will get to him. These, without hesitation, invest in each company of 50 million. Sleep-In knew that each of the companies today would bring 30% of profit. By investing 150 million, even considering that half will give these anew, today he had more than 20 million. At lunch, Sian Academy of Sciences came to Sleep, asking why he was sitting. He replied that he had no appetite. The SI noted that of the 3 dreams of the companies, 2 have 20% profitability, and soon their indicators will increase to 30. Dream in thinking about what the problem was. Everything should have increased 3 times, but has only doubled. He checked everything several times yesterday and could not understand why the figures now and did not grow more. Considering the past experience, if everything goes on his plan, it means that someone knows about his abilities. And this someone has skills that exceed the skills of sleep. The young man said that such an individual can be called a master if he intervened. But whether this is possible, because the shares have a confirmed yield of 30% and it cannot control and manipulate them. The dream of realizing that if a master is involved in this, he should not take risks at this time, using his abilities. After reflection, He said to get rid of these actions. The guy could not understand why to get rid of all the stocks, because some of them increased in price. However, the Dream Inn felt something wrong and advised these to hurry. These Academy of Sciences obeyed and reported that they earned 20 million today. Noticing that the expression of the face of Sleep Inn remained unchanged, she asked if he was happy. The Dream at last paid attention to a friend and assured that he was glad. Then Sai, the Academy of Sciences, was pleased to celebrate success and invited him for dinner. In the evening, when the boys arrived home to Anna, they met a maid and reported that the dinner was already covered. With a smile, she asked to serve the dishes he ordered. Entering the kitchen, the Dream was surprised and confessed that he just wanted to see how he lived. So he came. But I could not imagine that everything would be so gorgeous here. The maid brought the money mentioned by the Academy of Sciences. He ordered her to transfer the money to Sleep and asked her to go out. When the Dream asked that it was for the amount, the Academy of Sciences explained that it was 10 million won, half of what they earned today. Sleep asked if it was worth waiting for a few days before withdrawing money from the stocks. But these AC replied that he had a high mood, so he decided to share now. Instead, Sian An asked to Dream of sharing the secret. He mentioned that he learned that the Dream is a real share expert. Hearing that it was difficult to make such a profit in one day, she asked how the Dream achieved it. She also asked how the Dream learned about what would happen to Nuna and expressed the opinion that perhaps the guy actually had a gift of clairvoyance. However, the Dream stated that he did not understand what the Academy of Sciences was talking about. She explained that his father is engaged in the search for such gifted people, and somewhere in the world there are others who have the same talent. The Academy of Sciences noted that the knowledge of the future makes fear meaningless. The Dream, of hearing it, he mentally agreed with the guy, though he felt that he was still far from such a level of understanding, because he still does not know who this master is on his way. Sian attracted the attention of the Dream Inn, saying that if he had such abilities, he would be able to defeat his father. Dream Yu did not understand what it was about, and CA stated that it was his secret desire. Suddenly, the guy shouted, and the Dream Inn thought he had choked, but from his mouth, the blood flowed. See? Meanwhile, at the entrance, the man spoke to John Ho. The guard immediately warned that he was not allowed to go. The man, surprised, asked if the John Hoth and whether he had to interfere. N did not pay attention to the joke and only noted that the guest came to Sai, so the president should go. However, the man replied that he also came to say hello to the guest and advised to be not burdened with unnecessary things. Noticing the stranger, the Dream asked who he was, and these AC replied that he was Hubes, his father. Looking at the dinner guys, the man smiled and said that it was time to grow up, and to grow up to eat well. The man turned to Sleep In and introduced himself as Lee Mok Pyo. He noted that it was important to follow the purpose and asked if it is easy to remember. However, the Dream of noting that now is not the best moment for dating, as Sian AC suddenly coughed and began to be released. Despite this, the man was not surprised, believing that they have not yet become close friends with Sleep. The Dream of realizing that this did not happen for the first time and asked about the disease. However, the IOC replied that it is not up to date because it is not a guardian SI Anna. Suddenly, this Anna intervened in the conversation, noting that his father would not be happy if he learns. Mosi PE just agreed that he knew it. Then the man added that if you cling to every word, people will cease to pay attention to the environment. For someone to pay attention to these Anna, he should do something atypical. After all, they also have to eat and live, but if there is no food, I will not have a choice in the IOC, and he will have to make a living, even if you have to demolish the load-bearing wall of the house. Although this can lead to its destruction. Therefore, he advised the boy to obey him and warn in advance before he reached for a bowl with rice. Then the man turned to Sleep In, wishing him to eat and grow well, complimenting that they would still meet. A little later, the Dream came to Jaji to the hospital and shared all the events. After listening to him, she asked if it was an IOC of Pio from the consulting company, Mok Pio. Dream Yu asked if she knew him. Iji replied that he was quite known. About 10 years ago was the leader of the national gang. Now he washes illegal income, covering himself with business. Eji asked why this man came to the house of Anna, but the Dream In replied that he did not know, although it seems that she disliked him. After that, he wondered what the sick with the Academy of Sciences because he was blood flowing and advised him to go to the hospital for testing. Idzi replied that these are surrounded by bad people and advised the dream to communicate with him. Dream in denial, explaining that the person who came threatened these. That is why Joey warned him not to approach the guy. The girl explained that even as a police officer, it would be difficult for her to compete with such people, and warned the dream of not getting involved in dangerous affairs. At home, sleep at the bed on the bed, from time to time looking at the device, thinking about the words of Nuna about danger. Suddenly, he remembered how the Anayan said that his father was looking for people like him. According to Si Ana, if the dream is those who are able to see the future, he will not have to be afraid. Suddenly, the device hung, and the dream-in decided to go to the end, despite all the difficulties. As soon as he dressed the device, he immediately asked him to show him a negative event the next day. The guy was in an unknown place for him, reminiscent of the basement when he suddenly heard someone's voices. Looking back, the guy saw a tall man in front of him. He was only in pants, and his arms and chest were decorated with dragons. The man noted that they would start with a simple one, and suggested that the dream hit him in his nose. This would be enough to win. However, there was only one question in sleep: who he is and why he needs to beat a stranger. Instead of answering, he got a powerful blow to the side from which he fell to the floor, twisting in pain. Only then did the man reply that's so necessary, and if the dream does not do it, he would just kill him. Then he removed the bag from his shoulder and put a whole bunch of money, adding that if the dream is won, it will receive 300 million won at once. Sleep Yu, beating on the floor, could not understand who he saw during the viewing. The feelings were so strange that it seemed as if it were hit by a wild animal, not a man. After a few workouts, the dream-in realized that this rival is too strong for him. The guy did not understand why competing with someone whom he didn't even know. Therefore, Sleep-in decided that it is better to contact the police in advance or ask for help from the Ana and his guard. However, as soon as the guy stretched by phone, he was called from an unknown number. The call was a surprise. The stranger did not even introduce himself, only reported that he would send the address, and the dream should be there tomorrow at 6. The dream asked who it was, but the interlocutor only noted that he had also recently been in contact with him. The dream-in, irritated, asked who it was and why he needed to go to a stranger. However, the mysterious interlocutor replied that the dream would appear. Otherwise, he would tell the world about his ability to predict the future. The stranger warned the dream that he should come. Otherwise, his secret would become well known if he seeks help from the police or someone else. The stranger reported that he had sent an address and suggested meeting tomorrow to get acquainted and communicated, and then cut off the connection. Sleep suggested that if this person is aware of his ability, then it can be either a master or his close. Be that as it may, the dream of you could not miss this meeting. The next day, he appeared on the spot in time and saw a man he had seen before. He, noticing a dream-in, said that the guy probably has many thoughts and questions. If you wanted to know the truth, he had to do only one. The man said that the dream should hit him in his nose and then win. If the dream is escaping or not attacking, it will die from his hands. Win, he will immediately receive 300 million in cash. However, the man suddenly realized that it sounds crazy because the dream of you and so knows it all. Having said that, he rushed directly at the guy. The first stroke was struck, but the dream-in had time to evade and pull out the stunkwur. The guy planned to hit him, but the man noticed it and intercepted his hand. The stunner dropped out of his hands and flew away. A man with all the power hit a dream into the wall. The young man curled in half and fell to the floor, trying to look. And then, right in front of his face, a hatchet glowed. The guy jumped out and shouted. The man was surprised that the one who sees the future was not able to hold in battle even 10 seconds, and expressed disappointment in sleep. Then asked if the dream could make the situation more interesting. The man stated that from now on they would meet here daily at the same time. If the next time the dream does not last longer than usual, it is dangerous. Before leaving, the man reminded you of the consequences if he told someone. Sleep could not understand how much more fun it could, and tried to rise but worried about pain. The next day, he came to the same place again, and the man asked him if he had a good rest. The man tried to attack the guy again, trying to hit his foot, but he had time to leave. Then he struck his fist, but the dream-in deftly evaded him. The young man immediately retreated, and the man noted that he became much more skillful than yesterday. Sleep mentioned what he learned during yesterday's intelligence and training. This guy only aimed at his stomach. The man noted that if he just evades, he would never come closer to his nose. At the same moment, the dream rushed forward, trying to hit, but the opponent evaded. Grabbing the guy by the collar, the man hit him with his knee into the stomach. Sleep in the floor fell on the floor, becoming painful. The man noted that today he had lasting longer than yesterday and decided to spare him. He was already going to go as if he had a sudden dream of Rose, accusing him of lies, and again tried to strike. But the man escaped again, grabbing the boy by his hand and throwing through himself. Sleep fell on his back, hitting heavily. The man asked if the guy really thought it would work. He noted that something seemed strange when he struck him and asked if he had not come to a dream in his bulletproof vest. He poked the guy with his finger at his forehead, ordered not to twist his head and make no attempts. The man noted that the body of Sleep Yu should open his eyes and respond. At home, the guy took up the workout again. When the lesson was over, he suggested repeating, but received an answer that excessive use of preview could adversely affect health. The guy asked, dissatisfied, whether this was the same warning that usually appears in games and added that tomorrow he would have to withstand much more. Without spending time, he took up training again. The next day at school, the guy sat with a manual simulator. He approached him and asked what he was doing. Dream In explained what was training. At that time, the Academy of Sciences noted that even at breaks he began to run, and asked why he suddenly became fascinated with sports. Sleep admitted that he himself did not know where the sudden desire to play sports came from. Hearing this, she suggested to work together, adding that his guard has his own hall, where he sometimes comes to maintain health. So the Academy of Sciences suggested training together. Sleep Yu decided that the skills of ENHA could be useful and agreed. When the boys came to the hall, the NHO said that they would leave for 10 minutes, but the dream stopped and asked to talk. The guy noticed that even during training, he wore sunglasses. NHO was dissatisfied with whether it was all he wanted to know. However, the dream added that there are some who want to compete with him. Ho asked if someone was mocking him again and whether he should intervene. However, the dream replied that he should handle it on his own. He explained that the opponent was much stronger than him, and the condition of his victory was to hit the enemy on the nose. Therefore, the dream was asked to help him find a way to achieve victory. A man with green eyes clenched his jaw, hearing the words that his opponent is very strong. The guy touched his finger to his nose and repeated that if he could hit his opponent with his fist in his nose, he would win. The young man opened the brown eyes wide, pleading to help him find the way to win. At the same time, a man with green eyes began to look for something in boxes where equipment and awards were stored. A man with green eyes finally told the young guy that in this case, it was necessary to start with a skipping rope, and Karaoke asked how many times he needed to do. The man in the glasses, gloomily, strictly replied that as much as the guy was capable of at all. Hearing it, the guy was surprised, but the man insisted, "Act until you have strength. And when the forces are exhausted, the action is further, until you can overcome yourself." A brown-eyed young man noted that he should only think of how to hit his opponent in his nose. What an adult has asked if he was sure that he could avoid blows from the enemy who sets the rules of the game. The man in the sunglasses looked harsh, crossing his arms on his chest. He then said there was only one way to become hardy quickly. The coach noted that if a young man who is nervously holding a skipping rope in his hands really seeks to win, he should start immediately. One man's feet trembled strongly when he descended the stairs. Before him was a man with numerous tattoos. He crossed his hands on his chest and asked what happened to him that he was trembling like an aspen letter. It was the young man who jumped on a skipping rope. His rival asked if the guy seemed exhausted and whether he could fight at all. The young man replied that he could not, because he was training too much. And now he is so exhausted that he would not only be able to win, but even withstand more than yesterday. Also not capable. The guy leaned and asked the opponent to kill him, calling a scoundrel, but he just laughed, noting that suddenly came about death. The guy put his hands on the trembling knees, saying that he was actually most terrified by the fact that he was already ready to die. The rival said if he wins, he would receive 300 millions of won, and then asked if he was sorry for him. The tattoo rival sighed, rubbed the chin, and muttered quietly that it is not suitable, because he does not even value his own life. The man told a frightened boy who heard that he was living with a man who became almost a family for him, and his name is a tired Jeji detective. The guy, rubbing his chin, noted that it seems that the girl recently got to the hospital because of a knife wound. The guy expanded his eyes from horror when he heard that the opponent could just approach her and kill. The young man reflected, smiling that it would be easy to kill the bed. You can even get a little fun and then get rid of life. A man with brown eyes rushed to his evil and self-confident opponent, shouting and calling him a crazy skid. The guy whose body has recently trembled swung and almost hit the enemy, but he was easily evaded. Then he tried to hit again, but missed again. Meanwhile, his opponent was already preparing to strike a little boy. And here the man hit the karaoke young man in his stomach, throwing him far back as if it had not required him any effort. The karaoke young man suddenly engulfed a terrible state of health, as if it were not enough to get rid of. From this, it began to tremble again. The young man was lying on the ground, exhausted and helpless, and a tattoo was hung over him, standing a little sideways. However, the man did not get lost, made a step closer, deliberately stepping up with dirty legs on his opponent to cause him even more pain. The guy clasped his teeth and almost quenched from unbearable pain, but could not utter a word. The guy exclaimed that if his rival, whom he called a scoundrel, though his finger touched John Nunn, he would not survive it. The man, without stopping brightly, noted that the guy became more durable, despite what he said that he could not fight. All timely brunette with brown eyes trembled from rage, and his eyes expanded widely when he heard a rival saying something about his gaze. The man grabbed a karaoke young man for a t-shirt and sharply lifted him up. The guy remained surprised, wide open. The enemy, with a clearly dissatisfied look, grabbed a guy trying to resist and lifting him up as if hiding on hand. The man pushed the boy away from himself, and now the young man was helpless before the accurate and decisive actions of the enemy. The picture before the eyes of the young man mixed, the contours became blurred, as if a round appeared in the program. He soaked in pain. The man with tattoos insisted on the change of conditions. If the guy does not overcome him with that look, he will kill him, Tyre Johnny. Turning, the man said they would meet tomorrow and hurried to leave the guy who was motionless on the floor. The guy, who was burning with anger, began to shake again, crumble his teeth, and assure that his opponent was a scoundrel. The guy hastily pulled black gloves, seeking to act as soon as possible. The guy was engaged in training at home in virtual glasses, vigorously reflecting his fists from his enemies. The guy also wore a special black bracelet walking through the streets of his city. These were fast walks or sports running. The young man raced the streets among the high-rise buildings, running on roads and sidewalks, and special bracelets glittered on his hands. At home, he tried to train more and more effectively because the threat was really terrible and frightened. The guy trained carefully with various branches and special sports equipment, trying to master them to make his classes as effective as possible. He jumped daily on a skipping rope, though he thought it was quite ineffective. The young man was increasingly training at home every day, with a growing determination seeking to overcome the hated enemy. Step by step, he was approaching his goal. Each time his legs were red, trembled, but he did not stop hard workouts without sparing any drop of effort. The guy was clearly felt bad and constantly tormented, but did not stop playing sports and improved his endurance. And so, one of the days when he tried to attack a man with a short black hairstyle again, he easily avoided the attack. The man again struck a young boy, leaning directly into his stomach. The blow was so strong that the guy flew to the other end of the room. When it happened again, the man with tattoos was not surprised at all, but the karaoke guy was very frightened, curled up and loudly. However, his opponent only smiled cunningly and whistled, noting that they would see again tomorrow. The man threw his hand forward, dressing the same virtual reality mask again, which he constantly used to improve the efficiency of training. The guy also tried to lift heavy dumbbells and rods, though he was not very good, and it was extremely difficult for him. But a green-eyed man in sunglasses only crossed his hands on his chest and strictly said that 20 more repetitions needed. The next day, the guy with brown eyes tried again to strike, and his opponent just smiled. And here, the new moon with tattoos just hit his young rival with his foot, without stopping a malicious smile. The man said again, looking at the guy with a crazy look that they will meet again and tomorrow. The guy grabbed the weapon during the workout, remembering the mad words of his crazy opponent. A man in a green shirt suddenly appeared in front of the guy and reported that he had exhausted all the preliminary inspection skills. However, the young man did not lose faith. He continued his workout and did the pulling, even when there was no strength. He worked to the beasts once at a time, squeezing his teeth and moaning from unbearable pain, especially for his young body. A month later, at sunset, when everything was painted in orange shades, a little unexpected, the girl smiled soap, hearing the voice of a guy who greeted her on the extract and confessed that he missed. The young man's eyes were filled with tears when he saw his loved one whole and intact. He gladly noted that she was happy to see the girl safely. The girl smiled gently and asked the boy that he was so busy that he did not come to her and did not even call. Eiji noted that the guy became wider and asked when his shoulders became so spreading and muscular. Joey gently held his hand on his hair, and a guy with brown eyes, smiling widely, replied that he always played sports. Eiji asked how he achieved this result in just a month. The guy thought that if you calculate all the time spent in preparation, it took 6 months. Then the girl quickly said goodbye, suggested to celebrate her extract, cooking pork ribs to eat and talk together. The guy suggested to move the celebration for tomorrow, because today he had already planned things, which made him look quite annoyed. In the room, the lamp was dimly illuminated, barely illuminating everything with its orange light. There was a young guy in light sneakers whose legs no longer hurt or shake after intense training. In front of the man in the tattoo stood a guy with black hair, who looked as if he had lost his mind, constantly looking at him. The man smiled cunningly, ironically asking if it all happened because of him. Watching the guy daily for a month, he got used to him and noticed how the young man's skills improved. The man bowed his head and frowned gloomily when he noted that he could not care for him, but could kill a young man because he could not control his strength. The young man with brown eyes again stressed that he had already voiced his decision. It is time to act. And instantly, gathering with all his forces, he strongly assembled. However, the man easily flew from a stroke of a guy with dark hair, which immediately landed to the ground. However, the young man did not give up. He rose and tried to hit the enemy again, who was already ready to escape and to break him. But then the man suddenly froze, unlike a young opponent who was trying to hit all his strength. But the hand of a young man who was harmful to a man with short black hair suddenly flashed past his body, and did not happen. However, the young man was able to strike his enemy in his stomach, throwing him far back just as that brunette did with him. The man squeezed his jaw, flicked, and in his eyes almost indignant when he watched the young man in front of him, and the protruding veins were distinguished on his face. A young man with brown eyes expanded them, although no emotions were reflected in his face. Having clenched his fists, he noted that the interlocutor was ordering too many words, and it would be better to go to the attack. However, the enemy also did not give up and, accepting the fighting rack, noted that the boy should not sway premature victory due to a simple blow to the stomach. Then Chan sleep in again with all his strength tried to hit the opponent in the face. He emphasized and recalled that he had already told to attack. He cleverly escaped the rival's blow, bent, and simultaneously encroached for the counterattack. He already intended to hit a man with a short haircut in his stomach. It seemed that his movements were so fast that they were difficult to look. However, a tattooed man was not going to give up, trying hard to hit the student. The guy just wanted to defend himself from the attack. And here, Chan's sleep in the edge of the eye was able to notice a leg that rapidly approached the face of the boy. His rival was not going to delay or succumb to a boy. He struck his head on his head, and in the next moment he swung his fist. However, the schoolboy was not even going to take positions in this fight. He also lifted his leg, which caused surprise to his opponent. The opponent planned to strike a boy who approached the man with the intention to hit his fists. The man was easily evaded, holding an axe in his hands. Laughing, he asked if the young man was trying to imitate him. The schoolboy pushed away from the ground and wondered that his rival was only targeting his stomach all the month. After he analyzed all the previous blows, he understood it after 100th time. The schoolboy has already swung to hit a lost man with a short haircut on his stomach, and he just got numb. The boy thought it was boring, but a man, covered with tattoos, grabbed the boy's foot, pressing her into his body with his hand. He completely immobilized his opponent. The guy, understanding this, was very scared for a moment and lost. His eyes were widely revealed from horror, and he was convincingly breathing in the air. The man in the tattoos stiffened the student on the floor. The guy tried to resist, but even to repel the attacker. But then the student gathered all his strength and prepared to hit the self-confident enemy directly in the face. When the attacker saw a clenched fist, he again only opened his eyes with surprise. The schoolboy was unable to reach the enemy who was sitting on top. He also swung. A man with black hair struck a schoolboy who bounced in place with horror. The enemy, looking at it, admitted that he was a little sorry. Then he again hit the schoolboy with black hair on his face and mockingly said that he almost touched his nose. The schoolboy trembled, sitting near the wall, and the man hanged over him. He warned that if the guy continues to behave so, he may soon die, so it is better to get up. Suddenly, the student asked an unexpected question. He asked the man if he was not a rapper. The enemy asked the barely living guy in surprise. The brunette wiped blood from his nose and looked at the enemy strictly. He noted that the man did not even answer, but only constantly repeats that he would kill him. Brunetta lifted his gaze and continued to repeat his phrase. He urged to try to hit him, although the enemy did not want to kill him. The boy asked the man if he was training him. It sounded more as a statement. Hearing this, the enemy folded his eyebrows and wrinkled his face so much that it became curved. Brunetta continued. At first, he thought that the master planned to kill him, but it turned out to be a fault. He believed that the enemy had many opportunities for this. Chan noted that the reason was only one thing. His opponent tried to improve his skills. After that, the student asked if he was right. The boy with a short haircut smiled good, understanding. The student mentioned how 2 months ago he suspected that there was someone who knew about his abilities. He talked about Kim Yuen Mina, who was ordered to attack him with a knife. Someone changed the future he knew. Recalling that moment, the student continued to insist that it was a person with much stronger abilities. He called this man a master. Like Kim Yuen Ming, the enemy receives orders from this master. The guy said he was feeling different from the enemy. It is unlikely that such a powerful creature as a master has already appeared before him. Hearing this, the man was confused. Chan So-yu was said that the master always knows when something happened because of his ability. At this point, the guy looked extremely serious. He remembered the moments when he was on the hair from death. The guy continued to argue that his abilities were growing because of fear and continue to cause terrible situations. In the opinion of the young man, the master has always been a mysterious personality with a hidden face. He explained that, more simply, the master seeks to grow his abilities, which is why they have been doing it for a whole month. The brunette, with the appearance of a tired man, looked away and said that all this would only last to this day. A man with a tattoo asked the student again. The young man stubbornly insisted on the availability of repetition and preview during the month, detailed and delayed viewing. It has different abilities, but last time their development remained unchanged. The student confessed that before meeting the enemy, he is more frightened by the thought of battle with him. Hearing this, the enemy fastened his eyebrows and looked at him strictly. The guy stated that if he really intends, then let him do it today to scare him even more. He clenched his fists and got up from the floor. A man in a gray tracksuit reached for his pocket. He ordered the little boy to stand still and wait. Brunette had a confused look. The brown eyes looked very small, and there was a serious expression on the face. He inserted the headphone into his ear and noted that he would see if everything was fine. Seeing such a scene, Chan So in a wide open his eyes with surprise and fear. He was headed by a cold sweat when he looked at the man again in front of him. He suddenly approached the man and extended his hand. The boy was excited and loudly urged him to stop and not to wear it. The opponent frozen on the spot. The boy remembered the murder of Kim Yuen Mina because the headphones looked exactly the same as those used then. They could explode, which meant that the opponent's head could just fly away. The enemy only smiled brightly, inserted the ear in his ear, and asked if the guy was concerned about him. Then he thanked for it. The man turned to the master and asked if he heard everything he had just said. He also wondered what to do with it now. The rival of the student reported that he passes the words of the master. First, he likes his new nickname, so let the boy continue to call him so. The man suddenly turned away from John's dream and said it was time to open the eye of consciousness. The boy asked. He was struck by such a sudden revelation. The man was slowly going to his tempora, saying that the eye of consciousness is the best protection for the Chongxiao. The man put an axe on his shoulder and noted that the boy reached a new level. He looked at the schoolboy again. A bright blue glow struck from the chair standing somewhere in the room. It looked unusual, because the room was usually poorly lit. The tire of the Joey appeared on the screen. A trigger was pressed against her head. She opened her eyes wide and begged for salvation. The young man, seeing the scene, froze from shock. He could not move from the place and only tried to call Nuna. Meanwhile, the man with the axe remained absolutely indifferent. A tattoo man lifted his axe and stated that it was necessary to make a young man to save his loved one and dear person. It seemed like a white fire broke out in the eye of a rival when he tried to hit the boy with an axe, but missed. He ordered the student to open his eyes. The guy immediately bounced away from the man, collapsing on him in offensive swearing. The enemy rushed after him, once again assessing an axe. He really intended to end with him. The guy opened his eyes wide, turning around. His brown eyes became lighter than horror when he saw what was right behind his back. The guy decided to lift an iron object from the floor. In form, he resembled scrap, so his weapon was significantly inferior to the axe. Nevertheless, the guy still managed to stop the axe. He swayed out of surprise, realizing how close he was to death. He failed to disarm the enemy. However, the man with tattoos succeeded. He deprived the schoolboy of even this small and primitive tool. Now the guy remained completely defenseless, though he tried to prevent it. A man with black short hair swung an axe with all his strength, taking his hands back and strictly looking at the student in front of him. He was thinking about what was happening, and here with the topor in his hands, the man again hit the guy on his nose. He could only open his eyes even wider, accepting his horrible fate. And then the man swung the axe again. He hit with all the power he had to be. During the month of training, they prepared, so he did not spare his little opponent. The man realized that this time he could really kill. At that moment, the blade of the axe almost touched the neck of a frightened schoolboy who was desperately trying to evade. But when it seemed that the blood was spreading around, the guy did not understand what was happening. His thoughts were lost in hopelessness. He could not move. A man with tattoos froze with an axe and never dared to cut his head off. Before the eyes of Panya appeared a hologram of a man with a friendly smile. He welcomed Chan's sleep in a dream that looked embarrassed. The boy could not understand because the device was turned off while he sees his father. He explained that in the event of a crisis that would soon occur, they activate the hyperlink of preview. The karaoke young man looked around. His eyes opened wide from shock. He still could not realize the whole horror and tragedy of this situation. The father said that at the moment, the available skill allows you to see in real time everything that happens within a radius of 5 meters from Chan's sleep in 1 minute. The man was happy to explain that since only one skill is available, he is activated automatically. The guy just wanted to ask. And then the boy's face seemed to dissolve in an endless stream of distortions that completely absorbed his father. Purple, translucent glasses appeared on the face of a karaoke young man. There was a curvature around him, and the impression was that the guy himself was part of this fantastic flow, and suddenly everything restored the original order. An axe again appeared in front of the guy, which rapidly approached his neck, preparing to cut his head in a matter of moments. The axe constantly shortened the distance, and the young man felt his heart fading for a moment. The first shock swept it, depriving him of the opportunity to move. But wearing purple glasses, the guy was able to easily evade the stroke of the topora, providing him in advance. Despite this, the schoolboy was still scared. Before the eyes of the guy began to appear as if a purple sight, especially expressive on the face of his opponent with a tattoo, who was already going to attack again. The man waved his foot and struck the enemy with a blow. The enemy did not even have time to take advantage of his weapon. So fast and unexpected was this attack. The young man effortlessly pushed the heavy body of the man, throwing him at the other end of the dusty room. A young man with brown eyes could not explain the strange feelings that he was overwhelmed. The only thing he was aware, thanks to these glasses now, he sees everything. The axe has finally fell on the floor. So now a tattoo man also remained without weapons, and the strength of both opponents became more equal. The young man turned his gaze to the wall where the head of the tired Joey was still visible. Her view was full of fear. Dream understood that he noticed all the details, even the smallest. The guy frowned, lowering his gaze. These glasses had a striking effect on him. He thought that, in fact, John Nuna had not yet been caught. Then the timer's countdown started. The guy has about 6 minutes. The man with tattoos took the axe and rose from the floor, preparing for battle. And then the axe flashed directly in the face of the student. There were 8 minutes and 30 seconds on the timer. The young man was effortlessly evaded. These abilities have opened many opportunities. When the timer showed 10 minutes and 44 seconds, the schoolboy tried again to hit his opponent's fist until he was finally recovered. When the clock showed 15 minutes and 28 seconds, the guy skillfully evaded the blows and put his own. He saw everything as if in slow motion. When 16 minutes and 71 seconds left, the guy thought of how every part of his body feels everything that could harm. He felt vigilance, observation, and security. Then the guy struck a man with a short haircut, and he fell to the ground directly at the feet of his opponent. The man hit the schoolboy so painfully that it seemed that his eyes were reflected in the last drop of fear and pain he felt. He also frowned. It was incredible for a schoolboy. His eyes shone with bright purple light when he again analyzed every step of his opponent. The guy once, an amazing, struck the man with tattoos, causing him serious injuries, and he did not even have time to react, not to mention an attempt to answer. 10 seconds, the guy punched his man on his face and he fell to the ground. Chan's sleep at last hit his opponent's nose. The man flew far back. The boy's blow was so powerful that it seemed like a man with short hair had blood. He tried to protect himself, but in vain. Standing over the opponent, the guy seemed to try to grasp everything that had happened. He thought that he could even kill an opponent. However, a few seconds, the guy opened his eyes wide. It seemed that they were slightly blushed and the veins on the face began to protrude, and here the glasses gradually slipped out of the boy's face. He shook his head, looking away. His face suddenly faded and his head twisted. The young man suddenly fell on the floor, trying to hold himself with his hands. He was nauseous, and in general, the condition was desperately bad. The man who stood opposite only twisted, exposing his teeth. The young man trembled, feeling him dizzy in his head, and it seemed that she was about to explode. For the first time in his life, he was so strongly protected. The man, as if not wanting to see it, quickly turned away and began to mutter something about the boy's gaze. The rival Chong, asleep in the floor, lifted a headphone and continued to say that no matter who he was beating with, it still looks like a deception. After that, the man inserted the head in his ear again and pressed him closer to start a report. He reported that the eye of awareness was manifested in the dream of you. From the nose of a man flowed blood. The young man slowly tried to get up, returning to his senses. A wound was opened on his shoulder and the whole body trembled. Chan's dream of a sweat flowed from his face, but he continued to hold on and did not lose his morale. The young man was breathing hard. His eyes were half closed. He was thinking about whether it was indeed an eye of consciousness. The voice of the man persistently repeated that he understood his master. The tattooed man kneeled and said that the man he magnifies the master entered the divine kingdom and ordered him to show reverence. And then the man stretched on the ground in front of the schoolboy. After presenting, he said that his name is Pen-in-Su. The guy opposite barely tried to breathe, grunting and swearing. He asked why he didn't know the name of his opponent and who is this master. And so, because of a few moments, the guy looked up. His eyes were terribly frightened, and the space around him was again like a bug. A few seconds, the guy dropped powerfully to the floor, unable to move. He felt such severe headache that he could not even move. No longer blinking, looking at the guy in front of him. In his cold eyes, indifference was read. He was always like that, but now, staring at the wounded shoulder of the guy, the man only mutilated that the seams will need to be applied. Chan has already closed his eyes. Then Pen-in-Su lifted the boy on his shoulder, holding him firmly. He conveyed the words of the master, noting that this is really true. The master seeks to develop the ability of Chan. Approaching the front door, he repeated that the eye of consciousness requires great physical strength and endurance. This is a difficult test, so it is important to be careful to keep self-control. A small room with a TV and a bed unfolded in front of the man. Pen warned him that carelessness could be rest, because there was no fear of fear in this state. The man put the body of the student on a bed, similar to the prison. He noted that JN could turn into a killer capable of depriving a person without the slightest hesitation. After that, the man began to unbutton the bag, noting aloud that if Pen was won, he was promised a lot. And then a stack of notes began to fall on the face and body of the young man. At that moment, he opened his eyes. Pen-Su reported that Chan's sleep was promised 300 million won. He noted that if the schoolboy joins them, he will be able to earn much more in the future. Hearing this, the young man opened his eyes wide. The man pulled out of his ear and said it was a master's words. Peening covered his eyes, as if resting for a moment. Bills were scattered throughout the bed. The man did not stop talking. Pen advised Chan sleep not to tell anyone that he had business with them. It would be better if it is secret. Then the man began to recruit medicine in the syringe. Penother assured that it was a common drug and asked the boy not to worry and not think of anything suspicious. The man reassured the schoolboy, assuring that it was just a painkiller, and advised him to just relax. But the guy still looked at Penother. The tattoo man smiled widely, holding a syringe firmly in his hands. He assured that they would be called later. But suddenly, after a while, the guy opened his brown eyes wide. They looked frightened, and the gaze constantly jumping in different directions. The schoolboy got out of bed sharply, and stacks of money came together in one pile. In surprise, he asked, "Is there no one here?" Brunetta looked around and continued to mutter that some fool healed and disappeared, putting on the same clothes as his arrival. The boy did not inspire health. Then the guy noticed a stack of papers that lay quite close. It turned out that they were packs of 50,000 won. The guy looked at them, took one pack in his hands and whispered, "It's real, real money." The guy lifted money to his nose and sniffed. He remembered the words of Pen and Sue. "In the future, you will be able to get even larger sums." The guy said that maybe that master would teach him, because his skills are clearly superior to his own. He could not understand why the master decided to take up his studies. The guy lowered his gaze and began to think again. What a master could be good or bad. He could not grasp and understand that. He scratched his chin, thinking whether to tell Jaji Nuni, who works in the police, whether it is better not to do so. But then the guy realized something else. After shouting the name of John Nuna, he realized that he had completely released something. Jong opened his eyes wide. The guy was frozen, began to search the pockets of the jacket in search of the phone, and loudly wondered what time it could be. He was engulfed in great excitement. The clock remained 4 minutes before 11 in the evening. The brunette is almost silently muttered that the device in his room is about to turn on. The guy immediately called Aji Noon and asked loudly where she was now. The girl replied that she was home because where to be. The girl, talking in a confusion on the phone, asked where Khan's sleep you. She wanted to track him through the addition because he did not even go into the chat. The guy looked at the stack behind himself, then shone with a bright smile. He said excitedly that he would soon return home. The schoolboy began to put money in a bag and, rejoicing, asked John Noon not to enter if he heard some noise from the room. The girl asked in surprise. The guy hurriedly gathered and ran out of the room, closing the door. He assured that it was just a notification of the game or something like that, and asked John not to pay attention to it. The boy was already racing home, almost shouting into the phone. He reported John Nooney that he would be at home. Meanwhile, the window has already dried up. In many homes, the windows stopped glowing. There are only a few separate apartments where the light was still visible. Somewhere in this apartment was a little boy of 12. He carefully followed the fish in the aquarium and told about his father. The guy said they had little time, so he would have to stop at this until it is too late. He held the tweezers of some small insect. Scorpio grabbed an insect with claws. The boy noted that he should also practice more to improve his skills. The guy had short black hair and a headphone in his ear. He said that his father will be successful tomorrow, so you should not worry. He apologized that he would not be able to monitor it more carefully. And here the guy barely noticeably corrected the headphone and looked away. He assured that everything was fine and wished sweet dreams. A woman in a business suit came to him, which turned to him, calling him the eye of the events. She reminded that it was time to take medicine. The guy smiled cheerfully and turned to the girl behind. He remembered that he had already said that he no longer needed medicine. The girl carefully turned to the eye of fate again, noting that he has been more joyous lately. The guy clarified that she meant. The guy turned his gaze to Scorpio and said that when a dream is near, they had fun like ordinary children and had not felt such a long time. The boy said that the adults call him the Eye of Providence or Sunlight, but he likes more to his liking a new nickname, Master. He said it with a smile. The boy was a smile, and his eyes seemed to even sparkle in the dark. He said that he would have been teaching perfectly on a closed scorpion. There was a large stack of banknotes in front of the young boy's eyes. He talked on the phone and noted that he would come soon. The man quickly began to make money to a backpack and said that Nooney should not go if she heard any sounds in the room. The young man left the room and added that if a notification from the game or something in this kind, Nooney is better not to give this value. Then the guy rushed to run, assuring that he would come back soon. And it was pure truth, because he had already left the premises. A majestic building stood in front of the young man, and a night road illuminated with only a few large, bright lanterns stretched in front. Yeji was sitting in a chair when the guy asked her whether she heard some sounds from his room. She replied that no. The guy almost gasped, standing in the aisle. The girl, with surprise, asked where he was so hurried that he was bored, and what a bag of he had. The guy replied that there was nothing special in this bag. However, Johnny, as if in doubt, asked how to know that there was really nothing unusual. The girl scolded and asked sharply that her roommate was constantly looking for all days in her room. The guy asked, embarrassed. The girl asked if it was not something obscene. The guy immediately blushed and then began to deny. The girl smiled slyly and asked mockingly, noting that she could not even enter the room. So the guy exactly hides something. The girl crossed her hands on her chest and, smiling, assured that she understands the boy, but advised to follow the measure. The guy suddenly turned away and exclaimed that he was not looking. Then the girl explained that it is especially dangerous to watch illegal movies because it can lead to punishment. But the guy insisted that he did not look at such movies. Itzy also hurriedly went to her room, but before that she said that it is too late and time to go to bed because from tomorrow she began to work. Virtual reality glasses lay on the table and the computer was turned off. Noticing this, the guy asked in surprise. Brunette, watching them, suggested that the headphones would only turn on when he is nearby. The next day, the sun was already shining in the sky. Its rays illuminated a tall building in Korea. From one of the offices came a voice that insisted on the reopening of the murder of Kim Yuen-mina and gangster Cho Gun-sana, offering that the girl would be taken into the investigation. The man in the form only sighed with disappointment, asking, "What happened to them? Did they all crazy because of the media?" The man continued to assure that it was an investigative department which was already overloaded, while the girl was thinking of how she was hit by a knife. The police officer reported that the case was transferred to another department. The girl began to be indignant, claiming that she learned there was no progress in the investigation. The girl almost screamed, emphasizing that the moon had passed since the disappearance of John Gun-san. She was indignant that they could not rely on those who were not able to find even a local gangster. Suddenly, a man came to the office. Having apologized, he reported that Gun-san seemed to have escaped abroad. He has long tried to catch him, but did not have time. The policeman got up and reported that he was his friend, a detective of GU Dream of Thek, who is investigating Cho Gun-san's case. Then the man added that from that moment on, this detective will work in their department. The brunette clenched his jaw. Thek's Dream asked how the girl was called. She introduced herself and apologized for the previous mistake, looking a little excited. The policeman noted that they were lacking in staff. Now, when united, they must investigate undisclosed cases. The police officer looked at the notebook, stating that it was the investigation department and that all the information is confidential. AG said that 2 boys and 2 girls were found in the vicinity of Kulchon district. A month later, one of the girls was raped and killed in the same way, but the attacker was not caught. The girl pointed to the line, emphasizing that the only common thing between killed teenagers was found records of access to illegal gambling sites that attract OTT users. The detective noted that the incident was so well known that he had been following him for some time. The police officer noted that this happened 7 years ago, so the tired detective at that time was not a police officer. To which she replied that she was working in the police to catch such scoundrels. The girl squeezed the jaw and cast a strict look at the table, saying that she would work day and night until she finds the culprit. The man trained, squeezing some equipment in his hands. He repeatedly repeated the same movement. It was late on the clock, the arrow approached the 12th, and on the table lay glasses of virtual reality. Looking at this, the guy was disappointed that she is also not on today. The guy reasoned whether the eye reflects an awareness or is a hyperlink, but the device has not yet been working since he has seen him last. Looking at the glasses, the brunette murmured under his nose, remembering how the master called him a weapon, a tool for the exile of spirits. Then the guy pulled a black bag from the closet, which was dust among the rest of ordinary clothes. The guy looked at the stack of money and muttered that if he could predict the events the next day, he would have earned more. Suddenly, the guy was called from an unfamiliar number. The smartphone immediately began to vibrate actively. The guy pushed the bag back into the closet when a stranger from the phone reminded that they had not seen themselves for a long time and asked if he began to feel the attraction to money. It was Penn. He said he would like them to become close enough to recognize each other by voice. He suggested just his name. In other, he assured that he was enough for digging of the ground with gloves and shovel, and suggested that the guy join. It will send a geolocation, and it is necessary to come tomorrow at 10 a.m. The other said that if a guy digs a pit in a specified place, he would receive $1 billion. The guy was so surprised that he almost cried out of excitement, asking. Holding his hands, the guy stated that their only hint was that he once buried. And he only knows where. And then the man inserted a knife into the table and asked if they found it. The man studied the knife carefully, thinking whether it was true or just bluff. He decided that it is probably worth checking it. Before the eyes of the young man stood the majestic mountains and a thick forest. Holding a shovel in his hands, he noted that it was too high. The young man felt great fatigue and breathed hard. He noted that to climb the mountain, having a mask on his face and keeping a shovel in his hands, it is not easy. Fortunately, he has not met anyone yet, and so the young man with black hair decided to look in the phone and muttered that he seems almost in place. At this point, the young man heard a strange sound behind his back. He opened his eyes in surprise and turned quickly to see what was happening. Behind him stood a tree on which the cross sign. The guy sighed happily because he finally found what he was looking for. Then the guy began to dig a hole briskly with his shovel. Although fatigue was felt in his movements, he worked with inspiration. Then the guy saw what he did not expect. Drops of sweat were flowing across his face, but he did not seem to pay attention to it. A black round bag with a white cross appeared in front of his face. It looked strange. The guy was surprised to view the package, holding it in his hands. He thought he was too small to accommodate $1 billion cash, but suddenly the question was how the guy was able to find him. The young man, while in a state of shock, looked around with fear. Before the young man stood a man in a wooden mask from which only eye cutouts and smiles were visible. He shone in his hands. He asked, "Who are you, young man?" The stranger in the mask reflected aloud that the young man hid his face, so he was definitely not from the police. Hearing this, the guy was even more frightened. The man turned his gaze to the cross on a tree and said he could not leave such labels. So, when and how did the young man come across it? The stranger recalled that he had already asked about it and then suddenly rushed at the guy with a knife. But suddenly, a man in a mask attacked another weapon. He did not even have time to notice because he was too passionate about his opponent. When the stranger was again preparing for a knife, he suddenly stopped the axe that he rolled into the tree and protected the boy. The man belonged to the axe said that the boy was digging the ground and taking things. Then he pulled the axe out of the tree. It was a pin, who reminded the young man who had already asked him to go down and wait until he was calling. The guy looked tired. The man in the mask rushed at him with an attack, calling a short-haired man with a scum. But the latter was indifferent. The man effortlessly hit the blow, stopping the sword with his axe, which he seemed to have skillfully, and suddenly then a stranger, he described the arc, flew into the ground, leaving him defenseless and without weapons. Pin pressed the axe to the neck of his opponent and asked if he was so fast. The man in the mask felt embarrassed. The foam was indifferent to the young man, asking why he stayed in place because he had already ordered to go down. The stranger tried to retreat, and the guy immediately rushed to escape from these two, repeating the words of Brunetta that he was already ordered to go down. The stranger in the mask suddenly turned to Brunetta, noting that he was not at all like a police officer, so who he really is. Pin replied that the stranger was engaged in the police, namely the detective of the Idji Tire from the investigative unit of the main directorate. Through the mask, a crazy smile of a man who repeated that he had no idea how they found it, probably received some evidence. Brunette said he deserves death, but even if he is sentenced to death, such sentences do not fulfill such sentences in their country. The man in the mask asked if he would still be killed. Brunette, smiling widely, replied that it would not be there now, because a man is like a delicious dish that is sorry to throw away. The man in the mask swelled his eyes and noticed whether he was joking with him. After freeing him, he will certainly find and kill him first. But the man stopped the axe of the neck from which he immediately flew to the side, falling directly on the green grass. The man in the mask remained lying face to the ground, and Penn was in a hurry to leave, suggested that the stranger relax and return later. Subsequently, when it was even harder, a bright orange light shone in the room, illuminating everything around. In a dark mask, the brunette moved a dark corridor, past many rooms with iron door, bringing a package with him. And here again a call from an unknown subscriber to the phone of the young man. Noticing this, his hands trembled. The young man turned to an unknown subscriber who warned, "The package cannot be opened, removed gloves, touching his hands, or leaving prints." The young man looked at the phone screen in surprise and said he was already aware. But now he needed the subscriber to answer his question. He remembered the man in a mask and asked if the attacker was the same criminal he had previously mentioned. The subscriber confirmed his guess. The brunette noted that in this case, it is necessary to catch this guy and pass the police. However, someone on the other end of the phone replied that it was best left alone. The young man could not understand why he needed to do so, and asked, did he just find the evidence, caught the offender, and then just let him go? From the phone, a voice was warned. If the guy learns too much, the events will develop faster. He advised to focus on the important tasks to accomplish. From under the tube, it was heard, as they discussed that $1 billion needs to be accomplished in order to earn $1 billion. The young man wondered what they were doing. Penn told the young man to go to the second room at the left end of the corridor. The guy stopped for a moment and looked around. The subscription asked if the young man sees 3 safes on the shelves. The guy confirmed that he was seeing, and now 3 huge safes were really in front of him. The young man squeezed the package, listening to a voice that persistently convinced that the average safe is empty. He should put what he holds in his hands and close the safe. The young man said he had completed all the instructions and asked if something else had to be done. The voice at the other end replied that it was all. The karaoke guy was uncertainly asked when he gets his billion. To which Penn replied that the test, appointed by the master, is now beginning. The man noted that he had just put in the safe is the only proof of the fault of the serial killer, and he should never open the safe in the center. Then the man said that there were 10 million won on the left. Hearing this, the guy was surprised and immediately looked away. The man continued to tell that the case is a billion, it is his today's salary. The voice explained that it would not work out to open both at the same time. It is like playing clearly or not clear. You just need to choose one of the boxes. Open it and pick it up what is inside. The man noted that as soon as the guy would open a safe with a billion, the contents of the other would be destroyed by fire. The guy froze because he has already begun to reach one of the safes. The guy asked with uncertainty, but the voice in the winner persistently repeated that everything inside would burn to the background. The man exclaimed that this snail was the only proof of the fault of the serial killer, and a calm voice in the winner confirmed that it was so. The man explained that if a young man opens a safe to the right with 10 millions of won, the evidence in the central safe will remain intact, but a billion won in the left safe will burn. The man asks whether the young man will prefer to silence about the cruel crime and get a billion won, or give up money, but will help catch and punish the offender. Penn reported that he gives 5 minutes for reflection. If none of them will be opened during this time, the contents of all safes will burn. Then the man broke the call, leaving a young man in a stupor. He frozen in place, not knowing what to do next. And now a clock appeared before the young man's gaze with 5 minutes left. He could not understand that it was a senseless choice. The guy noted that it was not just a common case, but a true series of murder, and he cannot destroy the evidence. Otherwise, this offender is not caught. The man slowly reached out to the safe, his palm trembling constantly, because he was not fully sure of his decision. He ran to the other side and remembered. There was a whole billion that immersed him in deep reflections. The young man murmured that this amount is comparable to the greatest winning in a solid lottery as a chance to become rich, which he has long dreamed of. However, the young man immediately looked away, remembering that as soon as he opened something, all the evidence would disappear. It made him stop. The man just sank to the floor, looking at 3 safes. Difficult to exhale, he confessed that he would lose his mind soon. The young man with brown eyes grabbed his head, began to tremble and mutter that all this would break him. Why didn't the device just turn on? There is only 2 minutes left, which he immediately announced the voice, and the guy himself immediately realized. Hearing this, he sharply swore. After that, the dream corrected his cap and noted that he needed to think carefully about the situation. He realized that it was a test from a master, something like an exam. The guy was slowly approaching the safe, thinking which choice would receive more points if he organized a similar test. The man grabbed one of the safes and stated that when choosing from this angle, the answer became obvious and simple. A man opened one of the safes, continuing to think that it had to be discovered. Then, returning, the karaoke young man directed his gaze to the second safe, which remained completely unharmed. A moment, the safe caught fire from the inside and a bright flame broke out on all sides. It seemed that the fire was about to absorb the whole room. Seeing this, the guy almost lost the gift of language. In a trembling voice, he could only say that it was a real flame. Suddenly, a stranger called the boy on the guy again, and he raised his handset with trembling hands. The man asked if the guy had already decided how he would do, but the young man could not even understand what was happening. The voice insisted that the young guy had decided to preserve the evidence, but 1 billion he burned down and still burned. One man asked if the money was needed. The karaoke guy replied that there were no people who would not need money. Sleep asked that if the master provided it and knew in advance about his choice. The man at the other end of the line replied that it was worth asking for it from the master himself. A short haircut asked whether this guy really was waiting for the same choice in a similar situation in the future. Initially, the young man opened his eyes wide and frozen in place, unable to move, and then squeezed the phone. Then he relaxed and said, "If it is the only attachment to find the killer, it should be saved." After all, his mother was an officer. He said he believed that his mother was killed, chasing the offender. The dream asked if a police officer could choose another way, because there are things more important than money. The man, on the other hand, replied that he had understood everything, and there were evidence, although a million burned. He added that they will transmit this information to the police, so the young man can return. Penn insisted that the master argued. Choosing this path, the young man would have the ability that is more valuable than money, and therefore it is a profitable business. The young man was still shocked and asked hastily what the man said with a short haircut on the other side of the screen. The karaoke schoolboy was confused, mutilating that he would actually get more valuable abilities. He clenched his phone even more. Meanwhile, at the police center, where the duty of Joey was filming, the moon was already shining and the sun gradually went beyond the horizon. One of the employees argued that the number of staff should be increased. The girl wondered what were the hooks and what they could tell journalists if they did nothing today. There were 3 people in the room. Detective Shin explained that they reported non-existent evidence because of that crazy. And now it's on the first pages of all news. Another detective asked. He said that the deputy had ordered the news. Does she hint that this deputy is not a full mind? The girl asked why she was not informed about it before. The police officer ordered the conversation and noted that if they plan to restore the investigation into an undisclosed case, they should pay as much attention as possible. The policeman noted that because of this, they were more often called. But is it not faster than interviewing people alone? The girl was angry and noticed that no call was beneficial. The police officer replied that less than a day has passed since the news and advised to wait a little more. Suddenly, loud knocks were heard in the door. The police officer asked who was there and then ordered to go. The police officer reported that delivery had been received. Its recipient is the person responsible for the investigation of serial killings in Kolchkondon. AG felt anxious because of the parcel content, but did not show it. She just asked who sent her. The police officer replied that the sender was not specified. The man said that for the safety at the entrance, he was scanned, so there was no explosive inside. After that, he began to touch the box carefully. Then the man took a stationary knife and gently began to cut the adhesive tape from above to open the box. The girl looked at the contents of the parcel in surprise. It lay a black bag covered with a handkerchief. The girl began to say that in the black package there are evidence in the case of serial killings in Kulichichandon, as well as things with DNA samples. Behind were the words of a man who suggested that it could be someone's joke. But Jaji noted that first it is worth trying to find the sender of the parcel. The detective noted that the package should be transferred to the National Judicial Service to compare data with available DNA samples in the database. At the same time, in a completely different place where skyscrapers also stood, there were numerous people and families. On the bedside table, a man kept 2 objects, a knife and a wooden smiling mask. The man often quarreled. He did not get tired of quarreling loudly, waving his hands, and his fists were already covered with blood from frequent blows. He repeatedly hit his fist on the wall with such a force that she vibrated. On the surface, there were traces of blood and dents, evidence of its despair and anger. The stranger raised the question of whether they really intend to understand something and why he took the evidence. He thought whether these guys were playing with him. The man hit his fists over the wall again and again, saying that the police did not know this, so why they did it. His hands were in the blood, and on the floor there were fragments of boards. Suddenly, the ringing tune sounded, and the phone on the table was stuck with considerable force. The room called a stranger. The man dared to turn on the loud connection and asked who it could be. The brunette sat down on the floor before taking the call. On the other hand, a question about his well-being, which was even more embarrassed by the man. The man, raising his voice, asked, "Who are you to be interested in my well-being without even introducing yourself?" The voice on the other side mentioned the events of 7 years ago. The voice reminded how 7 years ago they stopped his series of murders. Hearing this, the guy froze for a moment, looking at the phone. He asked if it could be that it was this person who sent the scum he met today in the mountains. The man confirmed his suspicion. The man trembled all when he asked if he really was bullied and forgot about the contract signed 7 years ago. He repeated it again and again. The man said that in 10 years he was promised $1 billion, and now only 3 years left. At the same time, the stranger almost shouted, describing his expectations. The voice claimed that it was not a contract, but only a game. Did the man forget the conditions of victory? The interlocutor showed bright, impolite. The young man asked if a teenager would pretend that he had not noticed a dangerous crime if he was paid $1 billion. Even if the teenager ignores it, no harm will happen. The voice on the other side of the phone reported that a schoolboy appeared who decided to help in the caress of a dangerous criminal without even having $1,000,000,000. The man in the mask asked not to laugh at him, they say, unless the student did not need money. To which the voice replied that he was right, because money was needed by every student. The man in the mask trembles, widely revealing his eyes from fear. He could not believe that the schoolboy gave up $1,000,000,000. The phone glowed brightly when the voice at the other end of the line persistently repeated that the evidence had already been transmitted and it would soon be caught. The man did not understand why he was called. Then the boy was declared the conditions of the last game. He should kill the detective of Tire Joey until tomorrow as she investigated his case. The voice insisted. If he killed the tire, he will be safely taken abroad. Instead, the man demanded from them a clear explanation of why it should be eliminated. The voice emphasized that the guy is well aware of what they are capable of, so a man should obey his father's order. In surprise, he asked not to put the phone, because he was very frightened and puzzled by heard words. The man, with his fingers, grabbed a helmet lying on one of the boxes and swayed loudly. After that, the man hurriedly left the apartment, noting that if it is the only way, then there is no other choice. Outside the window, the darkness was already coming. The moon shone high in the sky, illuminating Korea. In that house, almost all windows were gone except for 2. Most people have already slept. The man in black clothes was about to climb to a certain floor, nervously pressing the desired buttons. It was a young man with brown eyes who had just returned home. He watched with enthusiasm what happened just before him. The girl was hastily dressed after returning from work. Suddenly, the young man shouted, confessing that something was scared. The young man noted that such things should be warned in advance because she did not hear how he went to the apartment. The girl, in turn, reminded that she was her home. The guy wondered if I did not say that she would not be home for a while because of night work. The girl replied that she had come to dress because she did not change her clothes for several days. The girl wondered what the guy did at 11 o'clock in the morning. With clearly tangible excitement, he replied that he was training in the gym. The girl asked what he did all these days and whether he plans to join the sports school. Her surprise was obvious. The guy thought about how to effectively apply the eye of consciousness because he needs to strengthen his physical and mental capabilities. A man with brown eyes confessed that he just got a little fascinated. The girl patted him on her shoulder, noting that the most important thing is that he does not do something bad. Idzi wished the guy good luck and again went to the front door. The young man wished Noonie a good road. When she left, the guy remembered that he considered the opportunity to seek advice because he felt involved in a violent crime. However, suddenly the sound was heard from the room, which called the guy to wear the device. It was very surprised by the young man. He broke into the room and saw that the glasses of virtual reality were glowing with green. He exclaimed that after so many days, the device finally worked. Smiling happily, the guy wore glasses and exclaimed that his dad finally returned. But suddenly, a strange silhouette began to draw in front of him. He was so blurred that it was impossible to determine something specific. However, with every second, this silhouette became clearer, as if the image was finally built. He was in front of a middle-aged woman with black hair and brown eyes, dressed in the form of police officer. Seeing this, the guy opened his eyes wide with surprise and stared at a stranger. For some reason, she caused him such feelings. The girl turned to Chan Sleep-In, almost fascinated by looking at him. The guy just asked who she is. Then the guy lowered the frightened look down. At first glance, his attention was attracted by a small detail. The girl's jacket had a plaque named Minji Hen. The guy noted that he had already heard that name. He remembered how Joey told that in the upper classes they lived nearby. And at first, she met his mother police. Hearing it that day, the guy was incredibly surprised and opened his eyes wide. He clearly could not understand what he said, so he decided to ask. And here the guy finally realized the truth. He looked up. Tears began to appear in his eyes. The guy remembered a telephone conversation with Jaji. She said his words coincided with his mother's words. Then he only asked in surprise. Nuna remembered that just like his late mother, Menji Hen, she saved her. The guy froze in place from hurt. A tear rolled out of the boy's eyes. His eyes were wide open, and he almost broke into a cry, looking at his mother's face. The girl looked very friendly. She reported that she had come from another preview and then congratulated her son. Tears rolled out of the boy's eyes. He held the girl firmly in front of his hand and said that he was her son. W. The guy was hotly calling his mother. He apologized for not recognizing his mother immediately. explaining that after her death, he hid all the photos that were in the house. He tried to reach her trembling hands, but the robotic voice only answered that it was an unknown team. He looked at his mother with horror. Dreamyu remembered how he saw his late father at one time. He tried to reach the girl again. However, his trembling hand dropped. He sighed heavily, but tears continued to flow. He has quietly murmured, which is not even able to talk to them. The guy quickly wiped tears and asked to start with a bad event the next day. The mother replied that the Dream You would not be able to use this ability. The man asked in surprise, and then asked to give a record today. The girl again stressed that the Dream You could not apply this skill. He asked if it was possible to use these abilities with Dad. The girl explained that another version of Preview allows you to use skills that relate to other people. The Dream clarified this question. She said that the person to contact is the tire of the judge, and the skill he can use is the ability to receive an inspection of important information for it in 10 seconds. Mom, having lowered her gaze, explained that because only one ability was available, she is automatically activated. The guy closed his eyes, checking new abilities. There are still traces of tears on his face, but they seemed insignificant. The Dream shouted, asking who this freak was. The robot reported that the stage of completion of the preview for another person has begun, but the Dream no longer heard the voice of the mother. He rushed out of the apartment in all pairs, using all the speed he could reach. He was afraid that this could really happen. The car of white was quietly moving the night road. Only the light of headlights and several lights scattered around. The Idji tire, who was driving, asked the Dream of what happened and asked to calm down and explain everything in detail. She warned herself to be careful. Suddenly, a motorcyclist left in a helmet, ignoring all the rules of the road. And at that moment, the motorcycle rushed directly under the wheel of a white car. The motorcycle even jumped, and Jiaji tried to slow down. Leaving the car, the girl asked if everything was fine with the driver. The motorcyclist, lying on the asphalt, replied that he seemed to break his leg. The girl supported her husband, helping him to get to the car, and offered to get inside to take him to the nearest hospital. But when Izzy's tire just reached for the car handle, she could not open it. The man who stood behind her, a quick, accurate, and verified movement, got something from his jacket. The man cautiously put a white handkerchief soaked in her mouth, impregnated with a strange, transparent liquid. The girl scolded. Then Izzy's tire was able to jump and break out of the arms of a man in a mask. He wondered sarcastically if it was strong enough for a detective. He scored and asked if she was a detective that was investigating the murder. The girl wondered who he was. The guy looked at the detective and instantly showed great surprise, although at first it was unclear why it happened. The girl targeted the gun at her poison, but her hands trembled. The man calmly said, "What can you do?" "It is only worth touching your nose, and it will end." The stranger insisted that this drug is extremely toxic, and even the smell alone can cause dizziness, as if after a bottle of soy. The girl became pale with every second. She came up and asked who he was. He replied that she was a tire of Jiaji, who is investigating serial killings in Kulchkondona. The man lifted the knife that shone blue and said that the detective would kill the criminal. The girl frowned even more, exhaling hard. She trembled strongly. The stranger said he kills only children and it is great for him. A man regretted that his last goal was an adult. Wishing Tyra Jom a happy road, he swung, but he was stopped by a man in a black mask who rejected the attacker with his foot, protecting the tires of John. The girl was extremely surprised and turned. For a moment, she even stopped trembling. The stranger in a knife mask now lay on the asphalt, trying to climb. It was extremely impressed with such a turn of events. It was a dream that was immediately understood by Johnny, who glared at surprise. The guy asked if everything was fine with the girl. The man in the helmet, trembling, rose to his feet. He also recognized the guy in the mask, widely revealing his eyes with surprise. A man in a helmet asked if he was the fool he saw on the mountain. The man, finally falling, stood up and asked a dream and why he decided to come himself, because he was acting on the instructions. So why does the other interfere? The guy widened his eyes sharply and tremble. Are these two guys really related to the police? Tired Joey shaking with fear, holding on to sleep in, insisting that he was running, because it is dangerous here. But the guy replied that she should first calm down. The guy stated that he would win the struggle for survival. Then, the dream in his fists and, as if heard, looked at his opponent. Sleep looked around, thinking that there are no CCTV cameras here, and the camera in the Jeji Nuna car also does not take this place. However, the young man's gaze still noticed one hidden lane and revealed what was actually there. And so the guy in the mask immediately rushed to that place, and the guy in the helmet hurried after him, asking where he intended to go. But unexpectedly, they stopped. The guy stood strongly on his opponent. He froze for a moment, dream in a decisive attack, but his opponent quickly retreated, holding a knife firmly in his hands. But the man was not confused and tightly squeezed the handle of the knife, preparing to strike on such a young rival. And then it seemed that a man in a helmet pierced the young man through, because the guy literally came across the sun. The young man felt deeply, telling how a dream and a fearlessly rushed man with his bare hands. He did not take into account that the boy had a bulletproof vest, so he did not hurt him. Realizing this, the offender was very surprised. Sleep quickly struck the enemy with his knee foot, breaking out of his strong embrace. The guy in the bulletproof vest had time to strike, pushing the man in the helmet as far as possible to maintain a safe distance. But when the knife flew to his direction, the feeling of victory and confidence in the new moon disappeared. He even frozen in place. However, the new moon managed to retreat in time, pulling away from the offender as far as possible. He called the dream in a scoundrel. The guy lowered his head that trembled like his whole body. He plunged into reflections and eventually reached one conclusion. He could not understand how the dream learned of his intention to attack the detective in this place and decided to come to save her, because nothing like this happened when he followed them. The young man hurried to unbutton the jacket, thinking about what to complete the case before someone noticed something suspicious. The jacket fell to the ground, and the guy realized that they had only one way. Seeing this, the guy in the helmet was very surprised and lowered his gaze down. His face reflected a complete misunderstanding of the situation. He asked what was dealing with the dream to maintain a shape and whether he wanted to remove the bulletproof vest in that case. The guy again rushed to the enemy, but the offender simply bounced, sarcastically throwing, "And what?" The young man threw his knife up, getting ready to catch him again. While the knife was spinning in the air, he began to think aloud, without taking his gaze from weapons. He really grabbed the knife and was already getting ready to strike Sono, who tried to evade. The man said that if you hit the knife into this place, Sono would die immediately. At that moment, the guy blinking his eyes, already ready for death, and even tilted his head. All that he left is to hope for the best. But the guy opened his eyes when he did not touch his face. He looked confused because he clearly did not expect such a turn of events. Before the eyes again, a silhouette of his father, who smiled gently. He said that the dream was confronted with a crisis, and because of this, it is suggested to follow the link for detailed viewing. He noted that available skills allow you to observe and respond to everything that happens within a 5-meter radius. Hearing this, the guy was extremely surprised, opening his eyes wide. The hologram assured that it was activated automatically. Then the face of a man who smiled brightly disappeared in chaotic mesentery and colors that filled everything around. And at that moment, it seemed as if the whole world suddenly froze and went to sleep which was surprised to open his eyes. And at that moment, the guy easily stopped the enemy, grabbing him for the knife. It had transparent purple glasses. Then the guy effortlessly disarmed his opponent, grabbed his hand, and pushed him away. And then the young man rushed against the enemy, swinging with a knife until he tried in vain to protect himself. And a thin knife pierced the stranger's sneakers and a helmet, who now shouted in pain. The offender, unconscious of pain, fell on the floor and tried to repel the dream of he. In turn, persistently warned that if a man wanted to survive, he was better not moving. The young man, carefully and with cold in his voice, warned the enemy that any movement could become fatal to him.